And we are recording. Hello, Chris
Hey.
Hanna. Chris Hanna once again. I'm coming with a new person today. We're just gonna go with Marty for now. This is Marty, and um, well, I mean, I'll just say it because we can edit out later if I say anything I'm not supposed to. I ran into Marty with her husband at the Radio Free Mormon and Midnight Mormons debate, and it was kind of a happenstance because you guys were at the front of the line, and I got put there as the de facto security for a moment.
It looked legit.
Really? You thought I was security for real?
Well, I knew who you were, so
Oh, gotcha. That's right. You'd seen us on the other thing. I didn't know I was going to be that type of security, but I did kind of show up there because they were a little bit feeling spooked. They really were a little spooked, but they were also doing a gag with that. Um, what did they have on? They had on
the
bulletproof.
bulletproof vests, right?
It was both a meme and they did feel spooked. Carden did show me some voicemails that he got that were pretty spooky. Like I'd be spooked, you know. But at the same time, they were goofing. But they wanted me to stand there until the real security got there, and so I was just kind of standing there making everybody wait out front. And to my happy luck, I got you guys were at the front of the line, so I got to chit chat with you for about half hour or something like that. And you and your husband both. I mean, why were you there for? You were in town. You're not from here. You're
Well,
not from Salt
w-
Lake.
we're from northern Utah, but so we're within driving distance, but we ended up staying there that night because we did go to Thrive too. So,
You went to the Thrive event.
mhm,
Oh
yeah.
wow! And so you had driven down for that weekend, or
So the number one thing that I wanted to go to was that debate.
oh really?
And so I was on the
Thrive is
fence.
too.
Yeah, and I was on the fence about going at all. And then last minute, I just had the guts to ask our parents to watch it because I didn't feel like I could ask my parents to watch our kids unless I was honest with where we were going.
Mm.
And I finally just told my mom, I'm like, hey, mom, so would you be willing to watch our kids? And then she's like, oh, what are you doing? And I'm like, well, there's this debate I want to go to. And then the next day, there's this apostate gathering that I could just,
What do your
anyways.
parents
So,
think about all that? I don't.
um, so my parents are disappointed, but I don't know. My
Your parents are
dad,
still fully.
yeah, they are. um, I think they're disappointed, but okay, at Thrive, there was really good talk by Katie and Alan Mount, and um, they talked about how his parents or his dad died, and his mom was really, really struggling. And he was just talking about how it was really hard for her. And um, anyway, it made me realize like this is probably hard for my parents too. So when I came back to pick up my kids, I brought up the talk and I just said, how have you guys been doing? How have you guys been? And my dad's like, oh, I'm okay. I know you'll come back.
Mm.
So, which,
But so wait. So how did like you had a whole? They knew that you were out though. So you've been through all that.
yeah, that's been, okay. So my personality is, I have to be super honest. Like that's just been my personality. So, when I was starting to doubt and stuff, I kept it to myself for quite a while. And um, I didn't feel like I could tell anyone until I could tell my husband first. And so I finally told him. And just the way the chips landed, we happened to read Saints. And I told my husband, I was like, you need to read this with me. And um, anyway, that led to us losing our loyalty to the church. That's how I put it. Because I had kind of already lost my knowledge of like, I knew the church was true. That was gone for a while. And I was just kind of hoping it was true. I had the desire for it to be true, if you will.
Yeah.
And then I just, for the first time, realized after reading Saints that the church is biased. Like I had this hope that they still had this like tap into objective truth, I guess. I don't know. Like, I don't know. It seems silly, but once I saw that they were biased, I was like, okay, I think we probably should hear what the critics have to say. Like up to that point, I'd never like you'd see these YouTube clips. I remember seeing a lot of John Streeter's YouTube clips, and I
Really?
never clicked on them because I was like, I never clicked on anything on YouTube that wasn't published by the church.
Oh, really?
Mm-mm.
Well,
So, but at that point, after we read Saints, I was like, I think we need to know what's out there. And
mhm.
then it did not take long in Reddit to find the CES letter or to
Oh,
find
so
reference to
you
it.
went through the CES letter thing. Okay.
Yeah, and so I read that, and then um, my husband read that, and that one didn't. The CS letter really did it in for me. Like not, it wasn't. It wasn't like I recognized it was biased, and even now I see that it's biased. It's one side of the information, but it's just it was so much stuff that I should have known, and I felt stupid for not knowing. Like it's like
Really?
I thought I knew my church history, and I don't know. I think the thing that did it in the most was the mantle is far greater than the intellect. I read that whole talk,
Hmm.
and I was like that. I was yeah, just the regular ex-Mormon stuff, where you feel um, like you were betrayed. So
You went
I
through that
was,
whole process. You and the
yeah,
husband born and raised in it?
hmm
Both of
yep.
you?
I think my husband grew up in a home that was probably a little bit better at doing their family home evening and all of checking, just doing the faithful things. My family was a lot more relaxed. We watched like a lot of rated R movies growing up, and
Oh, really? Hmm.
Simpsons was on the table. We were that family. So
They were questionable about Simpsons in my house, but for sure no Married with Children, like that. TV went off for that.
that's
But
funny.
no rated R movies in my house. But then I started sneaking them in my teenage years, but not very many.
Well, it would have been like Braveheart and like
Last of the Mohicans.
yep,
That's the one.
yep. So,
First rated R movie I saw was in school, and we had to get signed permission to watch Glory. And
oh yeah, I
but I
remember
remember
watching
some of
that
the
in school
kids in
too.
my there's still some of my Facebook friends this day they didn't get permission. I was like, nope, sorry, you can't
Yeah,
watch Glory. But
yeah.
so I was out before the CS, long before the CS letter hit. So like Mormon Origins, the Grant Palmer book was kind of my CES letter,
Hmm.
the start of it. But what really kind of even reading the book wasn't that bad on me. It was kind of like really. And then reading the fair articles because like right when
Yep.
any sort of thing like that comes out, they like dump five really quickly. And reading those or where I was like, ooh, what? It was that moment that I suddenly thought that there was trouble.
Well, when I was reading the CS letter, I was reading it alongside FAIR, and
Hmm.
their arguments were not satisfying for me at all. Like I
Yeah,
didn't feel like they were actually answering the question, like answering the criticisms.
I felt the same.
So,
Although, as compared to where it was back then, I think people like the Midnight Mormons try to get into better answers nowadays than what I remember from 20 years ago.
hmm,
But that's because they've had 20 years to roast on it. There's a little bit of a thing where like the internet caught them off guard, especially during like the CES letter time, and they kind of didn't really have a lot of time to start
well, do you know
thinking
what's
about.
funny? Oh, go
Go
ahead.
ahead. No, I was gonna say.
Oh, so when those videos dropped, I was actually just starting to look at fair videos. And so I was I was like right there, right when they dropped. And I was writing like before they shut down the comments and stuff.
Mm.
And so I was like doing timestamps and like just saying, well, what about this and what about this? And it didn't take like what 24 hours or something like that. And then they shut all the comments down.
Oh, really? Wow.
Because it was interesting because I mean I was trying to be extremely civil. And I was just asking questions and stuff like that. Like how I think the biggest thing that those videos didn't address is that it's like, oh, you must have been falling asleep during this because this was mentioned in this one obscure ensign in 1970. It's like, I don't know anybody that's read all of the ensign articles all like the whole time. I don't
Yeah,
know. I don't know.
it was addressed, or we did talk about it, or it was, yeah. Um,
Yeah.
I I had the internet experience, but you got to think it was like 2000. 2003-ish, 2004-ish internet, and the Mormon stuff that was on it at that time, and it was all just kind of like scattered across like boards and threads and stuff like that. I remember, I can't remember the names of those. I think they've even stopped some of them, but just kind of poking through them and reading through them, and I went through like a long extended thing. I had a little bit of a different experience that I went through grad school, like literary grad school, and started getting my doubts from general philosophy, you know. And through general philosophy is when I said myself, like, maybe I'll go back and this is where I was dumb, is like, I'll be the first person to kind of do a sort of like academic literary reading of the Book of Mormon. Like I was going to be like one of the first persons to try to do it or something like that. And
Oh,
I had
wow.
no idea and this, like the very first day I found out that there was so much, I was like, oh man, I'm such an idiot to think that nobody had ever done this before. Um, but then
Well,
that
so
was good.
yeah, that's kind of how my doubts started. Like, I went down some I really liked the magic show Penn and Teller Fool Us, and so there's tons of clips.
I love that.
So I really liked, I got into James Randi, and he's of course like a huge skeptic of religion and stuff like that, which I could look past. But I think that's when I lost my belief in like supernatural stuff. Like
Yeah.
here he had this like $1 million prize. If anybody could demonstrate any kind of psychic or any kind of supernatural ability, and nobody came to get $1 million. And I was like, that's weird. Cause I kind of had this, oh, maybe I haven't seen it, but it happens, like rare, but it
Yeah.
happens. And I realized like, no, what you're seeing is probably what you get. I don't know.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm totally on that same page, and it's why I mean the Midnight Mormons were kind of pressing on me today, and last night they were kind of sneering at people with atheistic type thinking, you know, and I've been out for so long that those types of discussions are talking like it doesn't twinge my heart in the slightest if they say that or think that. I actually stop and internalize it and think about it like, is it true that maybe like becoming more atheistic did make me more narcissistic or something like that? Like it did change my whole entire world to just thinking about the material and me and that sort of stuff. And it going through those time frames, I do credit Peterson a bit for of making me stop and thinking of what are all these things talking about if there is no magic, you know what I mean, or at least not in the sense that James Randi would agree is
Sure.
magic. You know what I mean? And so then that's kind of sent me down like a whole path of trying to figure out what they're meaning or what they're getting at. If I know there's no James Randi magic, you know,
Right.
and that's just led me kind of like down a whole different route of trying to make sense of the whole entire thing across several years. You know.
Right. Well, and that whole time I was following the Sam Harris and the Jordan Peterson talks and stuff like that. So I was listening to that, and there was one moment in one of their discussions. It was that very first podcast where they couldn't figure out what truth
True.
was.
Yeah.
Yep. And I was on a run, and that is actually the first moment that I can remember doubting, even though I kind of was like it. As far as supernatural stuff goes, it kind of occurred to me it doesn't. I wasn't really believing in supernatural things, but I never thought about it when it came to the Book of Mormon, like in the foundation, like origin story of the Book of Mormon. So I was like, yeah, I never really looked at it that way. And there was a moment where they were talking about truth, and it was interesting because they both agreed that it's important to be honest. And here's Sam Harris, who has a ton of integrity, and he's saying you need to be honest. And here's Jordan Peterson saying you need to be honest. And I'm like, do I honestly believe that there was an angel that showed Joseph Smith the gold plates? And I was like, I don't think I can say I honestly believe that. And then after that, it was kind of this thing where I would say, well, if God is going to be able to restore the keys and the things that he needs to restore, it makes sense that it would come through someone that did believe in that kind of stuff. Like that would be maybe the only way that could happen. So even though Joseph Smith maybe believed in extra stuff, he was still needed to believe, like, to bring back the restoration. So I was still like limping along for quite a while there. Like I was in a young or a primary presidency, and I loved serving the kids. Like I really loved like there were just moments where I could just feel, and it did. It felt like an outside source of love for kids because there's no way to describe it. You feel like it's God's love for children, right? And you have moments like that, and it just kind of carries you through. Um, but yeah, I started having a lot of serious doubts where I felt like I'd have these moments where it was good during that 3 years. And then I'd have these moments where it was like, I really wish I could talk to somebody about this, but they were just thoughts in my head. And I didn't journal. So there was really no way to think because I was just a bunch of random ideas floating around in your head. Right. And so, anyways.
So I I wouldn't I would say yes, it was 100% because of this, but also it wasn't 100% of this. But yes, it was 100% of this. Went through a divorce
Mm.
for this whole thing, and obviously you two got through that. Like, how did that work?
Well, I think part of it is that I didn't go down the rabbit hole. I didn't even know what Mormon Stories was. I didn't know any of that stuff until he was with me on that. Like, it's almost like you recognize this is this is what I've kind of thought. I've wondered. Like, I am a very conservative person. I think I need to make sure things are safe before I take the next step. And I didn't feel like I could take next step without him. And so I kind of wonder if um
Like you had to catch him up to speed before.
well, I had yeah, like I had to tell him first before I could go and look for resources anywhere else. Like it felt really dishonest to me to be going and looking up stuff online without him knowing about it. Like I would watch as much as I could without crossing that line. Like I remember being super interested in Leah Remini and
Yeah.
Scientology. I remember listening to a lot of Joe Rogan. He didn't like that because Joe Rogan said the F bomb so much. He thinks back and he's like, he remembers that. He's like, it bugged me that you watch so much Joe Rogan. But he only swore when his guests swore really a lot. And most of the guests I was watching they
Does
weren't.
swearing still bother? Like genuine
No,
question.
not
No, not so.
anymore.
Okay.
This was like a didn't want to offend God kind of a thing. Yeah, so I think that's a lot of and a lot of it is I still had the desire to believe. Like when I first told my husband, I wasn't even planning on telling him anything. He came home from an early morning priesthood meeting, and he was all gung ho about doing "Come Follow Me" better. So this is like September 2019. He comes home and he's just like, I think we could be doing this better, and we could be doing this better, and things are going to get hard out there for the kids, and they really need to be wanting to do this. Like they have to, we have to fortify. Like I don't know. He was just saying we should do all these things better, and I remember feeling like I was in a rut where I wanted to maybe read my scriptures more and be more consistent at praying and stuff. And I was like, yeah, but I've been trying to do that my whole life, and I'm not a very good reader, honestly. Like audiobooks have been amazing for me because I
Same
can
boat,
listen to it.
100%. I've had bad eyes since I was little, and I'll get sleepy if I read too
I
much
get
stuff.
distracted.
Oh,
I'll have
really?
to read like a page over and over unless the book is extremely gripping. I have to read it over and over again, or I'll
When
just
the world changed to audio stuff, it changed the world for me because I could just take it all in a lot
yeah,
easier.
yeah. So I think and I tried to listen to the audio scriptures, but they were the 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 reader wasn't. I couldn't. Anyway, so I always struggled with scripture study. I struggle with consistency in my life in general. So it's not really just I probably would have been benefited if I had mastered like prayer and scripture study just in a discipline way. But
The
anyway,
mission forced me to do it. That I never would have done it if it wasn't for the mission. But
I did have a time in my life where I was doing it really well, and things went really smooth that year at school. My freshman year, I did really good. I had a institute teacher that really motivated me. But yeah, so it's interesting because I didn't grow up in a very strict home, but I was strict on myself through the church. The church, I feel like, told me what was important, and I started kind of differing from my parents' point of view a little bit. Like I got a little bit more Molly Mormon, if you will, because I felt like that's what I was taught at church. And then, yeah. Anyways,
I actually I have a slight theory, although you can't say it's a theory because I haven't put any numbers to it or anything like that. But there's something about people who get like that ends up leading towards exiting. You know what I mean? Because there is some level of kind of putting extra intensity in studying and learning stuff and taking it seriously.
yeah.
That
Well, it's true because it's true. Like, there's no pragmatic reason to be a part of the church. It's actually true. That's how it was for me. Like, there wasn't. And then as I was going through all of these doubts and stuff, I'd say I was justifying it for pragmatic reasons. I was kind of losing that literal belief. But yeah, but like when I go back to when I first told my husband, I didn't plan to tell him. I just basically said, I worry that I'm not going to actually be able to do what you're saying because I don't know if I can even change my habits. I feel like I am the way I am. Like, I had actually gotten stuck in a rut.
did it change after you left? That's one of my big questions for
Yes, it
X1s.
did.
It
I got
did
I
really.
got out of a rut. Like, this is actually I've in the last probably 4 or 5 months, probably since fall. Is that September-ish, July? I can't remember. I joined this macros calorie counting thing, and her whole spiel was to change your mindset or you're not going to be able to change your habits. And it was like, your beliefs matter. And at that point, I'm like recently ex-Mormon, and I'm pretty atheistic in my mindset, and I'm like having a hard time being able to say anything along the lines of I am where I'm supposed to be, because I'm like, I am where I am, but it's like, what does that even mean? I am where I'm supposed to be, like,
Mm-hmm.
I really don't know how to describe it, but I was able to tell myself for the first time in probably like 4 years and actually believe it, that I am where I'm supposed to be.
Nice.
And it's been pretty awesome. Like, yeah, I was stuck. So when he came and he said that, I was like, the thing that was going through my head is, I don't think I can actually do that. I think I am what I am. I'm stuck in this rut. I'm never really going to be able to change this. I can't improve. I can't do that self-improvement. I kind of lost faith that I could do that because I'd been trying and failing so much to try to do better at that. And then I
You're
also
talking
was running.
about macros now?
No, this was
Or
back when
the
I first told my husband.
oh, okay.
Yeah. So he basically was frustrated because he's like, well, why don't you pray about it? And I was like, well, if I pray about it, even if I did receive like a spiritual witness, I would doubt that it was coming from me. Like, I would worry it was coming from me and not from God. Because
Mm.
at that point, I'd been listening to a bunch of Jordan Peterson stuff and psychedelic stuff. I'm like, oh my gosh, like, this could be. And to me, that's like a false witness, right? That's not real spiritual witness because it's coming. So how would you know it was really from God if you can manufacture these things, right? So anyways, yeah. So I was doubting. I was worried that I could self confirmation by self-deception, some kind of spiritual witness. Even if I received one, I doubted I could trust it was from God, basically. And he was really frustrated. He's like, why don't you just pray about it? That's how it works. um, yeah,
Did you have feelings like that, or at some point in your life, or
I didn't. I actually
me
never
neither?
had. Um, I remember I really relied on the talk by Elder Bednar, where he's like, sometimes it's like a light switch for some people.
Your husband did though. He did have those feelings.
Yeah, he said he had some moments like that. And he actually has like a million stories about prayer and just the finding the key type prayer,
Mm.
which, or but he can think of one time where he received a confirmation of a prayer where it wasn't true. But other than that, like, every time he prayed about something, it would work out.
Mm.
And he just constantly, like, just tons of random stories about finding things. Like, one time when he had a remote airplane and it crashed, and it was like, shoot, I don't even know which direction to go. And he prayed and he walked right to it. Like, just bizarre stuff that shouldn't happen. Yeah, so he had
My
those
friend
experiences
Kevin that I
along with like
podcast with,
burning. So
yeah, my friend Kevin I podcast with has a bunch of those too. And I just watched that Anthony Magnavasco from Street Epistemology. He ended up having like an hour with this Mormon kid who's he's like a philosophy major or something like that after the whole Lynn thing. And that kid described his belief as based around like the sum total of like the meta data of those experiences grouped together is where his evidence comes from, you know.
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, he
I
had.
didn't feel anything. I had a night on my mission. I'm telling you, like the whole night. I'm like, it's gonna be tonight. I'm praying tonight, and I sat and prayed all night, and I didn't feel a thing, you know.
Wow. Yeah, that was mine. Like I just relied on all the talks, like even deciding to get married and deciding where to go for college and stuff. I was totally relying on God guiding my thoughts and my like I and then how you feel when you start making the decision, right? So
Yeah, it's like post. It's like examining after the fact or something like that. Yeah.
yeah, so
I actually brought that up on the Midnight Mormons today. I probably used a bad term for it, but I've used it before. Maybe I should tell them to edit that out. But I said maybe I'm spiritually autistic or something like that. You know, like I'm cut off from that, from the way you guys are onto it. But you have to realize that I'm that. There's nothing I can do about it, you know.
right,
So I can only ever go and kind of review things after the fact and see what made sense or not.
right.
But maybe Bednar says I just keep going and the light will switch. But
Well, no,
this
but I
part.
did feel strong, right? So
Hmm.
he talks about the sun coming up, and I just felt like I was a sun coming up type person because I still felt strongly that the church was true, like very strongly, but
I
I
never
just never
did.
had a moment.
Mm. I I'll frequently make a joke that like maybe because of the way things are, it's like it was easier to believe the negative things than to believe the positive things, you know.
Hmm.
And so it's like I kind of believed all the not that you could say it's like fire and hell and brimstone in the Mormon church, but like you believe like, oh gosh, if I don't go on a mission, I'm going to regret it in the eternities or something like that.
Hmm.
And then on the positive side, are there eternities? I don't know. You know, so it's like I'm doubtful on the positive side, but I believe it on the negative side, you know.
Oh,
And that's as far as I'd say anything ever seemed really, really real to me is negative things, you know. And but that was just how I interpreted it, and that's how I remember interpreting it, you know.
yeah. Yeah, I remember thinking, I remember even thinking probably as early as high school, like it's a good thing I was born in the church because I don't think I'd believe this. Like, like I understood why people didn't believe it. Like, but at the same time, I was really grateful to be a member. Like, I was really proud to be a member. I liked being peculiar. Like, I was okay with, I don't know.
I'm still
Really,
sorting that out. All these 20 years out of the church, I'm still sorting that out. You know, like I'm still proud of my first 20 something years of being a Mormon, you know, and the Mormonism I grew up around.
that's cool.
I was thinking about it as I was talking to the Midnight Mormons and all that sorts of stuff. Is that in Salt Lake, in the Salt Lake Valley, you grew up outside of the Salt Lake Valley, but I don't know if it's the same where you are. But I didn't just have an experience with one ward. You know, I saw 2 wards, 3 wards, 4 wards, a stake, 2 stakes. You know, across 20 years, 25 years of living inside of Mormonism, I saw thousands and thousands and thousands of good people doing good things, spending good time. Maybe we had weird hangups about stuff about smoking, you know, or stuff like that. And then there's some other stuff where it would have been, you can totally understand how it would have been marginalizing to types of people.
Hmm.
But I think in most of that world, it was just droves of people trying to be good and being good people. Just avalanches of them in my memory, you know.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. I grew up in 2 different wards. We moved, but it wasn't like, were you moving around a lot? Is that why you
no, I'm
had
just
a lot
talking
of
about like you spend 20
splits
years
and
as a
stuff?
young guy around here in Salt Lake. wards every other street, you know, and so like
Oh,
you spend some day in a friend's ward, or you go to some other person's ward, or you hang out with these guys and see their ward, and so at one point or another, you've seen just hundreds of wards, you know, across
yeah.
time, or you jumped like 3, 4, 5 stakes, and you've seen all these different people, and then just moving around a little bit, but just being so close to here's a ward, here's a ward, here's a ward, and then you see in all of them, and then you just realize it's just so many different people, and to like a lot of times when there's all the negativity in the ex-Mormon world talking about these people, it's like just like an avalanche of people run through my mind, you know, like just a ton of different words that I'd seen over the years, and you know, I kind
That
of think of it,
influenced you for the good, right?
yeah, for the good, or that they were good people trying to be good and do good, you know, and
Yeah.
so I don't know, like I feel proud and somewhat still protective of all those people, you know, but
Did you feel that way right at the beginning?
no, not at all. It took me a while to
Yeah.
get back to it. You know.
I'd say I'm getting back there. There, well, so I also grew up in a farming community in a sense. Like, my parents have a dairy farm, and I grew up around a lot of people that didn't go to church and felt really ostracized because they weren't going to church, but they were really, really good people. And so, I don't know. There's just like,
Yeah, it's
I
probably
don't
a bit
know.
different inside of Salt Lake. I mean, I think inside
Yeah.
of Salt Lake Valley was just such a different experience than stuff that was happening out in.
Yeah. Well, I just knew that people could drink and chew tobacco, and they were they could still be really, really good people. Like, and that was an experience my husband didn't have, because he kind of had this. We had to move outside of Utah, and he had to go to work with people that drank before he realized, oh, normal people can drink and not be alcoholics. Like, he was, I don't know, like, I don't know. I never thought that people that drink coffee and stuff like that were bad people just because they did those things. I recognize there was a lot of good people outside of the. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, so like some people have like a little bit more of a insular view of the outsiders, and
Yeah.
I think maybe inside of Salt Lake directly, it's probably even a bit different in Provo, but there's something about maybe Salt Lake, Ogden area directly that you did have more interaction with non-religious people. Like your whole life was just kind of 50-50. He's right about 50-50, you know, and probably wouldn't be 50-50 out in Brigham City or something like that, you know. But,
Yeah. So yeah.
but
Anyways.
yeah, so I had a bit of the same experience, and I would say it was like almost like cheating in the sense of like I was up late reading these websites, and my ex-wife didn't know it. She had no idea the rabbit hole I'd gone down, you know. And there was parts of me that felt like I could maybe keep it under wraps for a while, and it came out to her, and there was a whole other thing with that, but it totally played into it not working out. But it still was a few years later before my parents found out, and it was actually an ex-girlfriend of mine from Brigham City who, when she found out, because she didn't really even know at first, she went and just told my parents, you know, and that's how I got outed, you know, of being a non-believer. But
Wow.
there was some sort of sense of it being like a hidden thing, and that sort of stuff, and anytime you let it out, it would kind of be a catastrophe or something like that, you know. But maybe for a day, it was never extensive, but I'm sure it would be worse in other situations. But
Well, so yeah, so the thing that my husband was reading when he first considered that, like, where he really first seriously considered, he was on Brian Hill's website and reading about the Partridge sisters, and that's what he let himself ask himself, like, okay, so there's the thought, why would God do this? And then you have this thought, well, who am I to say what God would do, right? And then he goes, well, God gave me a brain. Am I going to be ashamed when he says, I gave you a brain? Like, why did you think I would say that that was okay? And so at that point, that's when he kind of allowed himself to, like, I don't know, just kind of be more objective about it, I guess. I don't know.
So
And then,
his had more to do with like a situation of seeing an atrocity a little bit than
uh,
about more about like historical
yeah, that was
lies.
his shelf crashing moment.
Yeah.
Was reading about the Partridge Sisters, reading about the letter that he asked her to keep secret, and just seeing that that doesn't seem to be how it should have operated. It shouldn't have looked like grooming. Like,
Yeah.
that's not how God would have done it. Um, yeah, and then this was, I think his was within weeks of when my, like, that's where his like loyalty kind of went, like, whoa, why wasn't I told, kind of a thing. And then um and I would say that, and that's how I describe it. It's not like that's when I lost my belief. That's when I lost my loyalty to the church, was when I read the CS letters, when mine was. I was ready to resign right then. And my husband came home from work. He's like, oh, calm down. It's not that big of a deal. There's no way that you could have read anything in one day that may lead you to believe that. And he
Maybe
read
not.
it, and it wasn't convincing to him. He was like, no, this is like, and he read View of the Hebrews, or he skimmed through it, and he's like, that's not the Book of Mormon. And he just didn't see it like I saw
So
it.
I want to point out like something interesting because if you ever watched like Kate Kelly on the Midnight Mormons,
I did watch
I think
that.
I brought this up to you, but she mentions like there's like a female way of exiting the church and a male way of exiting the church, and what you're describing is you two are the inverse of what she claims happens. You
Oh,
know,
really?
she says that the males leave for all these historical issues, and the historical issues are convincing to them, but then the female has to see some sort of
Moment where it's not
moments where it's
good.
an atrocity or yeah, a grooming moment or a
Huh.
oppression moment or something like that. And I think I'd mentioned to you on thing that like, I just didn't think that was true. I mean I was like I mean maybe on average I don't know, but it didn't make sense to me when I've heard her and others kind of make the same claim, you know. But,
Well, I think there's probably I don't know. I feel like my interests tend to be what generally align with guys' interests. So that
really?
doesn't surprise me. But my husband is very much like, we're probably too much alike in some ways. Like, we met in our engineering classes. So
That's right, engineer. That I mean that's true. Not on average, not that many.
so I don't know. Like, and then when he allowed himself, he had problem. Like, what's interesting is that I was able to integrate a lot of stuff where I had a pretty good experience, I feel like, as a believer. And he didn't. Like, he was doing things because the church told him to, and it wasn't because he wanted to. Like, for example, he loved the phrase "no shit, Sherlock."
Oh yeah,
And
but he
he,
wasn't allowed to say it or
right,
something.
like, he always wanted to say that, and he couldn't. And see, where I was like, well, like, I don't know how to explain it. Like, he just was doing things, and there
My,
was no pragmatic reason to do it. It was only because it was true.
yeah,
Like, so it really bugs him that he lived a certain way for so long for something that he no longer believes it. So that bugs him a lot.
well, I mean, we all are. Here's the thing that should bug us all is we're all still probably doing that in some way at this moment
Sure.
for something, you know,
Sure. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that's
We
kind
don't
of
know
the
what
issue.
truth is.
Yeah, yeah, and but my older brother, his wife almost wouldn't date him because at BYU he had a reputation of the guy who says shit sometimes, and she'd heard that, and then she's like, oh, I heard he says shit. It's funny because they bring that up all the time. Like that was the big
That's
bad
funny.
thing, you know.
Well, shit,
But
hell, and damn were never swear words in my house growing up
they
either.
weren't. Well, they weren't in mine either, and that's why my older brother
Well,
said it. But
that's
they
the
were
only
in.
language the cows know. So
We had my parents, as Mormon as they were, my mom made some food. She called it shit on a shingle. I think that came from the army or something
we
like
had
that.
shit on shingles too.
Do you call it that?
Yeah.
You called it
It's
that.
actually goldenrod on toast, right? Like
Yeah. Yeah.
it's an egg, a hard-boiled egg on toast
Yep.
with like a white sauce. Yeah.
Yep. Yep. So, you guys, did you? I don't know if you want out or not. Did you resign?
Yeah, we did.
Yeah,
But
I
we
did
actually
too.
are pretty active in the word still.
Really? Like go? You go?
Not on Sunday, but any of the activities that they invite us to, we'll go to, and my girls still go to the activities. So,
That's awesome. How do you pull that off?
um, I just set my boundaries, and we have really cool ward members. Like, I really do feel like people can maintain friendships and leave the church. There's definitely like awkward phases, and it is not easy. But I don't know. It was really important to me to maintain those friendships, and so I offered the olive branch first. So I just made sure that they understood that I wanted to still be their friend, and and I don't know.
That's really
It's
cool.
working out.
That's
We
awesome.
didn't,
It's awesome. You
and
can do it.
like COVID, obviously nobody was going to church. We were still members when it started ramping back up in the spring. Um, I guess when did they kind of start in-person church again? Wasn't it like in June of
I'm
this year or last year?
I'm out of it. Like I've been out of it. I haven't been to church
I want to
in.
say I want to say it was like I want to say it was around June or something like that, but I thought we resigned in February.
It was that recent, huh?
Yeah, it was in early 2021 that we resigned, because what happened was
Wow, that's pretty recent.
the missionaries we stopped going when COVID stopped everything. So the timeline's so interesting because we got COVID in the middle of it. So
This is all
September,
more fresh than I thought it was. I thought you guys were like 5 years ish.
so September 2019 is when I first told my husband that I was struggling
Wow.
with knowing and that's how I worded it to him. I think is like, I don't know if I know anymore, and I don't know if I can ever know. Like, I don't know if that's a good method for knowing things, is basically what my problem was. And then shortly after that, I got called into the Young Women's Presidency, and I told the bishop, I told him exactly what I told my husband. I was like, okay, I'm willing to serve, but I think you should know this. And I told him, and he still gave me the calling, and I was relieved. Like, I was like, oh my gosh, I can be completely honest and fully participate. They're not going to take my temple recommend
That's got to be a
away.
recent thing. That would not have been true like 20
Well,
years
and
ago. I
maybe
don't
that's
think.
what it is. I don't know, but the bishop was really cool about it and let me serve. Um, and then I had a spiritual high. That's how I describe it, a spiritual high. And that's why I read Saints. It's because that was on my back burner. I was told by a stake president in Colorado to read it. We moved back to Utah in 2018. We were in Colorado for 7 years, and just had on my back burner that I needed to read Saints, but it was just on that to-do list that it was so long that I never got to. And so it came to my mind after this all happened, and I was like, well, maybe the Saints, like I was picturing the legacy or 17 miracles. Like I was just picturing some kind of faith promoting thing. I was like, well, if the Saints, maybe that their testimonies can help me, And so I read Saints thinking it would help, and it did not. So, yeah. And then it was November. So I wasn't in that calling for very long. It was like 6 weeks that I lost like all my loyalty to the church, and I didn't feel like I could teach the restoration anymore. And then it was like the first week of December, the Young Women's president was like, I really feel strongly that I need to give a lesson on the restoration. So if there's anything you can think of that you can add to the lesson on Sunday, yeah, just let me know. And so this was probably Tuesday, the activity before the Sunday lesson. And my heart sank because I was like, I can teach a lesson on being grateful. I can teach a lesson on, being kind. I can't teach a lesson on the restoration. I can't even sit in a room and feel honest about it. So I told him about it, and then I hummed and hawed, and ultimately we decided to both go and resign. So the Saturday before that lesson was given, I called the bishop, or we texted the bishop and said, hey, we need to talk to you. Can we talk to you today? And we both asked to be released. He was in the elders quorum presidency. So anyways, then I was released that Sunday, and then he had to wait for the stake to approve it. So his was like 3 weeks after that.
Wow.
And then COVID hit. And so we kept coming to church all the way until the week before they shut down stuff for COVID. We tried out a Presbyterian church. We went to a Presbyterian church, First Presbyterian. Just in my head, I was like, I want to expose. I didn't want to just stop going to church. I wanted to show the kids that lots of people have lots of different beliefs. And so we were going to try out other churches, but COVID stopped all that. So we never really did.
So are your kids still going?
So our oldest daughter is almost 12, and she just kind of believes what we believe, not surprisingly. But our 9-year-old says that she still believes in Jesus. So there's that.
Nice.
I don't know. Like I don't know. We don't really, they know, like, we don't hide stuff from them, but at the same time, we don't really tell them what they have to believe. I don't know how to, I mean, but they're kids. They believe what their parents believe for the most part. So, but they like hanging out with their friends, and they like the activities. So they like going.
Yeah.
And a couple of times, my 9-year-old, she's like, can we go to church on Sunday? And I'm like, okay, I'll come with you. And then Sunday will roll around and she'll be like, oh, never mind. So,
and you feel, ooh.
yeah. But I've told her I'm willing to go with her. I'm not going to make her go by herself. And that's happened a couple of times, but she never follows through. So
it's so funny because like I work really hard, partially because there's some sort of a, I don't know if you can call it like a exercise in trying to think about things in a certain way. I don't even call it like academic or anything like that, but I'm always kind of trying to, in the Jordan Peterson way, rescue the father of the church and try to understand it in different ways and think about it and re-understand it. And like the second, like I catch a whiff of showing up to like a ward or something, like I'm like, oh, I can't do this. Just like, it just takes like half a second of that.
yeah, I think I could do it better now than I could a year ago, though.
You want to know what? When I was at that Radio Free Mormon debate, I think I mentioned in one of my other podcasts, but like looking out at the people there, showing up to that, like kind of in groups to watch it, it was like I kind of had like, I hate using the word PTSD, but I'm just using a joke. But like I had ward PTSD. Like I'm at a ward. Like, what's going on? But so you're able to maintain the friendships through that, which I think is awesome, and everybody should be figuring out how to do it. Some of that is that I think Mormons are starting to figure out that they've got to do that a bit better because it's happening so much.
But it doesn't hurt. The young women's president grew up in Missouri, and that didn't hurt. Like she grew up with a lot of people that probably knew the church history too, and she was still willing to be friends with them. I think it is a little different when you're leaving the group versus you never were a part of the group. That's got to be a harder friendship to maintain. I'll be honest, since we've moved back to Utah, we didn't have friends like we had in Colorado. I won't say we don't have good friends here, because we do have really good neighbors. But we made a group of friends, and I think it's just when you have little kids and you do like group babysitting stuff. We made a group of friends there that we're still friends with, that we've gotten together with since we moved back. Like just really, really good friends. And those friendships are still intact. Like I don't feel like I've been dumped by any friendship that I well, really by any. Like I feel like there are some that I don't see as much, but we're not at church. Like I feel like that was all the friendship was. Yeah. So you stop going to church, and then that's why that friendship stopped. But any kind of friendship that I had outside, that we hung out outside of church, those things have maintained. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Strangely enough, though, like I lament those ones too. Like it's there was something about being in a ward that put you around people that, and you felt like some sort of family level, somebody who's just kind of in your vicinity. And even if like you didn't talk to them very much, like that's still like a contact you're having with the person, you know? And,
well, we've been going to the activity still. So like we went to the Christmas activity, and we got to catch up with a bunch of people. During the summer, they had these like cookie things at different people's houses, and we went and had cookies with people. Like we're just trying to let people know that we're trying to let people know that we care about them. Like that's our way of saying we care
See,
about you.
this is
So
a it's kind of one of the awesome things. I think that's awesome of you and your husband is the sense that maybe there is kind of like a feeling of most of us ex-Mormons, and you have it too, is that you want to be the one who's looked after, or the one who like consider my position and my opinion and understand me and that sort of stuff. But that kind of puts it on them to give that to you or something like that. And I
yeah,
think there's some sort of method of like, maybe if you say, hey, I'm gonna take care of how I present myself to you and care for you, like take a little bit of the ownership of making sure that it's good.
yeah.
Because
And
they're gonna,
I try not to like give them any false hope. And that's part of the reason we resigned too. Was like I didn't want them to think that they needed to fellowship us and like that was okay. There was several reasons why we resigned. I was actually watching a Jordan Peterson clip, and this kid asked him and Brett Weinstein why. He basically said, "I'm kind of leaving this leftist ideology, and is it my responsibility to convince my friends?" And Brett Weinstein basically said, "Well, if you can show them an error, that's the best way to like try to show them there's these errors because their ideology is not fitting with reality. And if you can show them one of those errors, maybe it will, you know, like maybe they'll wake up." And then Jordan Peterson basically said, "Well, you can just be honest with them and say you're not sure. And the best thing that you can do is walk away. Them seeing you walk away is probably the best thing you can do." And I felt like by not resigning, I wasn't doing that. Like I wasn't actually walking away by not resigning. So like it was interesting because I mapped that on to leaving Mormonism.
yeah.
Like
Well, but I think that's, I
so
mean, that's pretty much the whole podcast thing I'm doing is probably how you'd go too, is like we take all these things, we map it into what our experience is, because
yeah,
it's a microcosm of it's happening everywhere, on some
yeah.
level. But
Well, and it was the unsure part that really stuck out with Jordan Peterson because if I'm being completely honest, I'm not sure that walking away from organized religion is the best thing for society and for the generations below me. Like if my kids don't carry on that tradition, is
that was
is that going
that
to
was the
hurt the
entire
fabric
discussion I
of
had with the midnight.
society, right?
Yeah, I had that entire discussion with the Midnight Mormons today.
But at the same time, if you don't believe it, I don't think it's a good thing to just I don't know. I don't think it's good to say things that you don't think either, because that's another thing Jordan Peterson talks about, which I really like him a lot. If you haven't already,
Yeah, I
can't
picked up,
tell.
and me too, and that's kind of a tough thing to do because it's become like so internet meme worthy to say, oh well, that's such a meme thing. But the problem is that people haven't really dealt with the concepts and the ideas and that sorts of stuff, and so much of what I tell people a lot that Jordan Peterson's kind of Malcolm Gladwell in the sense of you're not just dealing with Peterson, he's telling you the ideas of hundreds of other people who
Right.
were huge major thinkers and stuff that's worth dealing with, but it for sure was like an other side of the coin. And one of the things that I brought up with the men, well, they wanted to talk about it, was the evolutionary reasons, pragmatic reasons for religion, and we talked about that for a good 20 minutes today. And that's like I told you, it was like throwing them red meat, and that's fine. I'm fine throwing them red meat in the sense of I know a little bit that in my atheistic world, like I was talking about the first 20 years of my life, I'm still proud about. I know that that's gone. That's somewhat gone in my atheistic world, and I think some of the ways we try to recreate it is a little bit of a synthetic creation, But
Yeah. Well,
and how?
there's
Go ahead.
the secular world really sucks at like getting to know your neighbor. Unless you are a super outgoing, extroverted type person, uh, church communities are such a crutch for us to get to know our neighbors. And so basically, we're using the ghost of being members to maintain friendships we already had, but we really aren't that great at getting to
Exactly.
there's someone two houses down that I didn't know because they weren't active. I have no idea who they are.
Well,
Like
I was telling my girlfriend when I've been out of it for a
that's not good
while.
either.
Yeah, I was telling her like I don't know anybody who I live around. And I was telling her, like, when we grew up, when I was a Mormon growing up, we would know who lives in every one of these places right around
Except
us.
for the people that didn't go to church, right?
Well, we'd start figuring them out too, especially as like little young guys who'd kind of go around knocking doors when we had to do like fast offerings and stuff like that. But we got to know everybody. Like, I mean, the whole little subdivision I grew up in, at one point or another, I had been in every single house in that subdivision. And
Yeah.
a bunch of them weren't Mormons, but it was because of Mormonism that we got around and moved around and saw these different places. But like I was just saying, I was lamenting the fact that like those kind of tertiary friendships aren't on your radar anymore. Like there's something lost in that too. Like it's not the direct of somebody who you were a really good friend with, but you knew they were in the ward. Is like that. There was some value in that too. You know, there's still some. Well, Jonathan Haidt talks about Durkheim a whole lot, and Durkheim started all of the father of sociology started from the concept of realizing that there's something valuable in religion for the sociology of people and gelling together. And we're not doing it very well. Every once in a while, you see something like Thrive where they start saying, "Hey, we're going to try to do this," but it is a little bit like, I kind of joke about it, like it's a bit like we're gonna create a synthetic eye, like religion is the evolved eye. You know, it's like your actual eye, but now let's just start over from scratch and let's create a synthetic eye. It'll be just as good. And there's a little bit of a feeling of it like that to me. It's like, no, you didn't go through the Darwinistic fire of death and whatever to evolve into the thing that actually works. But
Yeah. Well, one thing that John Dillon, he ended his time lot, and he talked about I think he coined, I don't know if he coined the term but he called it pods. And he's like, because he was actually talking about that. He's like, he tried to start church groups, and what he started to find is that people would come for a little while and then they'd meet people, and then all of a sudden they'd disappear because those people were going and meeting together and having dinner or going camping together. And so then they'd fade away. And so, and then he was disappointed in that because he really wanted to recreate church in something that he did believe in, right? He didn't want to support something he didn't believe in, but he was trying to recreate this church thing because he agreed that was community was needed. And then I guess he had an epiphany, and he just said it's okay to come to meet people and then to create your own pod and get that kind of support. And you find other common things, and it's not ex-Mormonism. Like, you actually find other things in common. And he was really excited about this idea. And so he's just basically said, what we want to do is start these little Thrive areas where you can meet people, find someone that you have kids the same age or whatever. You can meet someone, have other interests in common, and then have pods, have a group of people to support you where you don't have your whole social circle that's like
maybe it's an
sad for
idea.
you.
Maybe that works. Maybe that will turn into something. But I kind of have a skepticism of that. I've brought it up before, but my skepticism of it is just that, like I watched The Amazing Meeting with James Randi. Like, I was around. I was an atheist, and I was there, you know, for all that stuff when that stuff blew up, when it just fell apart.
Oh.
And it fell apart largely due to wokeness. Anthony Magnavasco didn't want to admit that, and when he was being asked about it by John DeLynn in their episode. But
I missed that. I didn't hear John DeLynn bring that up.
Yeah, he asked him quite a bit about it, and he just kind of was going, I don't know, and he knew.
Was
like,
it in? Because I don't think I watched that whole week of the Street Epistemology.
It was the first episode.
Oh, okay.
It was the very first one. He was asking about it, and
because I'd be interested in what his answer was.
It was nothing. He was, I don't know what happened. I don't know. And the thing is, like, I know that he knows what happened because he knows the sides personally. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He knows the people who, like, they brought up that Hemmant guy and Matt Dillahunty, and then on the other side of it, you'd have Peter Boghossian, who invented the street epistemology thing, and him and that side, you could call that maybe the Dawkins side a little bit, but it just really kind of blew up into like a Puritanism, and it's so funny to me because like you see all these things that supposedly we're supposed to be free of or whatever as we go exiting these religions, and it seems like it. Not only are we not free of them, we triple down on them. You know what I mean? And don't have good exit routes for them. Like so one of my large things that I'll say is like something like thrive. Maybe it'll survive. Maybe it'll die on the vine, like other things, die. But if it gets big enough and goes long enough for 100 years, it's going to do certain things that by the end of those 100 years, you'll be able to point at it. Just like you can point at Mormonism today and say
it's some kind of dogma.
Well, not just a dogma, but things will have happened. There will have been harassments. There will have been some sort of hidden thing of something going bad. That's just the institution. That's what,
sure.
And that's kind of one of the things Peterson will talk about. Is like, there's always snakes in the garden.
Yeah.
And so the institution that you have, no matter how big, like no matter what institution it is, it's going to have those same problems. It's the nature of reality for it. And so like at some point or another, you kind of have to rescue the institutions you have to talk about Peterson's new book, which I actually haven't ever read that one, but he has something about don't denigrate institutions or carelessly, even though. But maybe Thrive will do it and just be pure and perfect all the way through and never need to be burnt to the ground. But
well, that's why he wasn't really hoping that it would rely on Thrive. Thrive would be a place to meet people.
He was hoping it would stay.
Well, just so you have, and that's what we really craved that in 2020, and there was no getting together in 2020, and so, but we really craved to meet somebody right where we lived that was going through something we were going through that we could just get together in person with, and we just couldn't do that. And now that COVID's kind of gone away, we have met a couple of people that are local here, and not surprisingly, I think they're probably more left leaning. And like I said in my podcast, like I absolutely mean it. Like when you move in, people are willing to disagree with you and still be your friend. And that's one thing I've noticed with, I mean, it's like you said, I think in one of our chats, like they have big hearts and
the left leaning?
Yeah.
I think left leaning is all heart.
Yeah.
I don't think there's.
So it's not if there's a flaw in it, it might be like the, I don't know what that.
There's some perfectionism in it, like you got to be perfectly,
Yeah.
But
just like the overprotective parent maybe is.
Yeah, that's
if I were to like criticize some of leftist policies, that might be
the overprotective parent, and part of that is infantilizing something that doesn't need to be infantilized.
Yeah, maybe, I don't know, but anyway, as far as people go, there are just a lot of really cool people that have left, and even though I think we see a different existential threat in our politics, let's say that way.
So I didn't want to like mention that way, but you said you were conservative, but you were kind of talking more in the sense of when you mentioned it earlier, you're talking more in the sense of like you're a person who is conservative in your decisions. But did you also mean that in the sense of conservative?
It depends on what you mean by conservative, right? Because it seems like if you like certain comedians, you're conservative, even though that comedian, you know what I mean? Like
Joe Rogan, who's not a conservative,
right? So I don't know.
Traditionally.
I'll put it this way. I'll be honest. When I try to listen to like not podcasts. I'm trying to think of the guy that I listen to. There's one that I kind of like. What is his name?
Well,
there's Dave Packman that has a YouTube channel, and I'll listen to him, and he bugs me 100% of the time. And then when I listen to Ben Shapiro, he bugs me like 75% of the time.
Shapiro, I'll give it a hard 50%. Like
lately, it's gone up though. The thing that's bugging me, I haven't
listened to him lately.
It's the tribalism that's bugging me, and so.
The whole Daily Wire crew will say stuff like I'll listen to them and like especially like when they're underdogs. I'm like I can agree with you when you're the underdog, but I know that if you guys weren't the underdog, you'd be trouble.
Yeah.
You'd be authoritarians. I know if you weren't the underdogs, you'd be the authoritarians.
Yeah, we have a history of that, right?
Yeah, But they beyond that will say it. Like they announce, like Michael Knowles will say, "Yeah, we need to put in laws like no alcohol and stuff like that." Like
Yeah.
he'll just announce that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So like I like their underdog takes, and they're free. They're always freedom of speech when they're the underdogs. Like there's some of that that's flipped on the left and the right, and part of that is how you know the hegemony's flipped. You know what I mean? But I also know if the hegemony flipped the other way, that I think the Daily Wire people would go right back to being censorious themselves. You know?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So when I say so I would say there's the existential threats that I see. Like if someone was going to make me choose a side, it would probably be the AK-47 carrying, what do you call it?
Libertarian.
Yeah, well, not even like country people. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Those are my people.
Yeah.
So, and I know that scares a lot of people. Like, they
Yeah.
don't, I feel
It
like there's
surprises me that it scares them, but
a culture thing that I know that they're good people, and so I'm not afraid of them.
yeah.
But at the same time, I see the dehumanization going on, and I am afraid. I'm not afraid they'd ever hurt me, but I'm afraid they might hurt some of my friends that I've made. Does that make sense? Like, there's a lot of I do not like the dehumanization that's going on. Like, I would say you could describe me maybe as a Jonathan Haidt. You know how he's kind of on the left? I would
Yeah.
describe myself as like a Jonathan Haidt, but more on the right side of like policies. Like, I would rather support like a conservative policy that upholds what we already know is good than like possibly breaking anything. I really like John Stossel.
I like
So
John
he's
Stossel
like more
too.
of a conservative libertarian, I think, isn't
Yeah,
he?
yeah.
I don't know.
He goes on the line of calling himself libertarian and that sort of stuff. Do you like Michael
Of course,
Malice or
yeah, I like
Dave Smith or anybody of those guys?
Michael Malice is interesting. I've listened to him on a few podcasts just because he's come in contact with a bunch of other people that I follow. But
He's kind of right wing, anarcho capitalist type. But
it was Dave Rubin that brought attention to him, and it's
yeah,
actually Dave Rubin that brought Ben Shapiro to my attention too. Because
really,
before Dave Rubin, I thought Ben Shapiro was some alt right guy. Like,
yeah,
I
that's
really
what.
did. And I was like, wait, he's an Orthodox Jew? Like,
yeah, yeah,
totally
and the
surprised.
libertarian one at that. At least he is while he's the underdog.
Yeah.
But my a drummer in my band, he and I went through it too. That he thought Shapiro must have been some sort of Nazi alt-right guy. I play in bands. I play in a couple of different bands, and as you can imagine,
Well, why else would students be shouting him down? Like,
yeah, and as you can imagine, that world is pretty left leaning in the bands and that sort of stuff. But I actually knew this girl who was like a bodybuilder who I'd been around a whole lot, who went to that Shapiro event to try to scream him down from being there. But
wow.
at the one in Utah, but that actually Steven Crowder had some people infiltrate the Antifa group here in
I
Utah
remember
at that
that.
one. But yeah, all those guys. I mean, I think maybe it's on both sides. I like the underdog. Like when they're the underdog, I can agree with them, and then as soon as either one of them becomes the overdog, they become the authoritarian. You know, if they're a little bit.
Well, I haven't ever experienced it while I wasn't like a religious conservative. So I would say through my faith crisis stuff, I would say that I moved from thinking conservatives were right and they were wrong to understanding the Jonathan Haidt more, where they're probably seeing different errors than I'm seeing. And
That's interesting.
so
Yeah, I forget. My dad actually helped work on the campaign of Faust, the apostle, James E. Faust, who actually ran as a Democrat. And
really,
my dad was a liberal. There was a bunch of liberals. You could even kind of say like almost that. Oh, who else were the other ones? Like the Hubie Brown, like liberals. There were liberals all throughout the Mormon. My dad worked at the church office building for years. Actually worked with John and Lynn's brother for years and years.
wow.
But there was all sorts of like liberal Democrats within that, and I grew up kind of like these slight liberal, you know, not you say it's slight, but like they would have voted Democrat pretty much their whole lives, and there was a healthy amount of them, and now there's way more since the Trump phenomenon happened. Like there's if you read that Atlantic article I pointed out a whole bunch of times, where they try to point at the maybe the Mitt Romney's like skewed Democrat all of a sudden in some years there. But I always grew up kind of on that side. So, but because of that, like I went through a little bit of like that problem with the satanic panic stuff in the early 90s, the 80s, where like they thought the Led Zeppelin CDs that I had needed to be gotten rid of and all that sorts of stuff. So it's like I had my problems with the authoritarian right. I went through that, and then I saw the flip happen. And that's and I'm more than positive it could flip back. It all just depends on who's kind of got the upper hand, But
yeah, I think I grew up with the view that the Constitution was like pure and good, and all the changes to it were bad.
Oh, really? Like the amendments, even, or the first, second, third?
Well, no,
after the 10th.
Yep. First 10 were things that the founding fought. This is how I remember my dad telling me.
After the Federalist Papers. Yeah.
Yep. The first 10 are just like things that should have been obvious, but just in case they're not obvious, we're going to write them down. Just in case they're not obvious. But then,
nice.
Not that it's interesting because, like obviously there's the reason they made that available to have amendments is because they knew they didn't have it right. And so it's so interesting to have that purity mentality about the original Constitution. It should be exactly the way it was.
Well, my whole belief, and Peterson kind of got me into this, was like the Jungian concept is like any sort of religious thing or what the Constitution has in it. What makes it good is the variability, is that it can be changed, and even on the religious end of stuff. And I kind of feel like I feel bad sometimes for the religious people who are trying to hold on to the concept of the idea was we had all the truth from the start. Like you should have held on to, like you have the truth maker. You have the thing that will help you alter into truth, not the thing that is already all the truth. And,
right. Well, that's kind of changing though, because I think more and more people, like I know that my brother that will talk with me about this stuff, is that instead of thinking that it was all revealed to Joseph Smith, it's more of a work and a wonder. Like it's always changing and always becoming better. That is kind of the new way of thinking about it. I think
it's a better argument.
Yeah.
But then you have to argue for incrementalism, and that's kind of my big fight with progressive types. Why I'm not a progressive type. I too now would call it conservative, although my whole entire life that was supposedly a liberal, But I'm a conservative. Like I'm probably closer to right at what Jonathan Haidt is. However, a lot of people will say the Adam Carolla thing of like, I stayed here and they just shifted around me. I didn't really say. I'd say I have shifted a bit more to where you are, from the sense of seeing that like I put it right about the same, like the right side of Jonathan Haidt. But I started right where Jonathan Haidt is. And then I'd say I kind of moved over as I saw some of these things play out. And
I'm just open to being wrong too. That's like a new thing for me.
But that's my stance. My whole entire stance is that it's not. Is I agree it's not right yet, but incrementalism is real and works. Whereas the progressive side is burn it down, start perfect, and now it will be perfect. Burn it down again, forever revolution, type deal. And that's kind of the essence of the thing I clash with, But I kind of feel like the Mormon Church is in the stance of like, I think they have built within it a way that they can, obviously with revelation and all that sorts of stuff, they can incrementally improve. But I feel like there's a push from the other side to, I think it's mixed messages from DeLynn. Do you want to burn it down, or do you want it to incrementally improve, or do you want to, what are you trying to get out of it? What do you want, And I believe it can incrementally improve, and it always has incrementally improved. It's always a little bit behind, but
one thing I've wondered is if the reason that religions are struggling so much is because things are changing too fast.
Yeah, for sure.
Like the amount that they need to change it becomes so blatantly obvious that it's changing that they can't rely on being
there's
conservative ideal anymore.
There's a double-edged sword with that, because the revolutionary side themselves might run themselves right off a cliff. And if the religious side tries to keep up with them, they might go right off that cliff with them too, and you don't know what the correct answer is. So like, there's part of me that's like rooting for the religious side to hold a bit, but at the same time I'm saying like, no, don't hold on to that part. Don't hold on to the part about like, gays are the worst thing in the world or something like that. But hold on a bit to what you are. Don't go right over the edge with it. And that's happening in all religions, all over the place. Like you
Sure.
so
Yeah, being slow to move is
yeah,
that is so
Chesterton's
interesting.
fence stuff.
Being slow to move can help you survive, but it can also be the thing that kills you too.
Yeah.
Like I don't know, but I think we're not going to solve problems without talking to each other.
I
Like
agree
that
with
is
you.
like probably the number one thing that scares me.
I agree.
So
Totally. But it is what it is. It's how it's gotten there. So but I don't know, you have ideas of how to start talking to people. I sometimes
yes, I
feel
do.
like I know you do. I feel like I think I did start out years ago when I was squarely on like the Jonathan Haidt left, start trying to talk to people and be polite about it, and things were especially amped up around the start of the Trump stuff. And it's kind of funny because most of the enemies I made was when I was squarely like, hey, I was with you, like Trump's the worst, Trump's terrible, but like why are we doing this? And it still just got you ousted from even talking to anybody who was if you had any sort of doubt or questions about any sort of thing like that. But the it does seem somewhat like it's maybe not as charged now, but still charged. But I think in some sorts of levels, especially with like those the podcast royalty of ex-Mormons and all that sort of stuff, I like bridges burned. Like for me, like I don't know if like there's no going back for me, but like someone like you can maybe start talking or saying different. Not that you have to take on that battle, but
Well, I've been trying to be as transparent as I can. Like if someone doesn't like what I think or say, then okay. Like I've not been secret about what I think. Like I've been pretty open about it. Um, I will say there are things I am willing to say not public that is maybe a jerk reaction, and I go, is there a better way to say that, right? So like
uh,
there are things that make me angry, or they get the emotions out of me, and then when I stop and take a minute to think about it, I can go, okay, I can see their side of it, so I'm not going to say it in that way, right? Like, and I don't feel like that's me being disingenuous. That's just me taking a moment to think before I say, right? Like, and I think that's something we should all do a little better, just being more civil, right? Like, I don't know. No, but I'm actually doing a training right now for it's called Three Practices. And they do these circles where some topics are more controversial than others. And it's really cool. Like you are meeting complete strangers on a Zoom call, and you're hearing someone else's perspective, and then you have a chance to ask like clarifying questions. And I don't know, it's really cool.
it's a bit
I
like
hope it
street epistemology a little bit, but
No,
not so much.
it's more practicing. It's called Three Practices because you're supposed to practice curiosity, basically.
It's more
Because all of
conversational
us,
than like you're
yes.
trying to.
Well, just instead of practicing being heard and relaying your ideas in a way that people can understand you, it's more of like, can you be actually genuinely curious about what the person you disagree with, how they think? And it's not in a way to like change their mind. It's like, can you be genuinely curious about why they think the way they think? Maybe you can learn something, right? Like, and if anything else, it's really good for humanizing somebody else, because they will say something that surprises you almost every time, and you're like, I can see why they think that. At least you can say that they're not evil anymore, I guess. Like, I don't know. It's really cool though. I really like it. That's why I'm doing the training.
I think that's true. There's so much over the past several years, and part of my problem is like I've done like the anonymous arguing online too, like on Twitter and Reddit and all that sorts of stuff. But some of it is, there are levels of maybe both sides where people aren't arguing in good faith, like in the sense like they're they're not.
Time wasting almost.
Yeah, or beyond that, like they know that they're doing something for a utilitarian purpose, like the ends justify the means of what they're hiding or lying about.
Mm.
You could say Mormons have done that, through the ages. Like there's some milk before meat in politics,
Mm-hmm.
and it gets, I don't know, it gets hard. It gets hard to wade through. Well, I mean, I guess it depends on the relationship. Like one of my errors has been like maybe I got into like some real feisty Twitter fights or whatever, and then I come back to Facebook and there's somebody that I know kind of making a similar argument, and I come out with like the full fire that like I was already using on somebody else who was like a full ideologue on somewhere else who was a complete anonymous person, but yeah, there's room for improvement in that, but part of the problem is everything on the internet feels forever, and it's like you said something feisty to somebody 5 years ago and it's forever, and
Yeah, forgiveness is not really a thing anymore, is
yeah, it's
it?
gone.
Like,
Yeah.
and in fact, you can not only can you be in trouble for something you say today that was wrong and you can't repent, you can be held accountable for something you said 10 years ago.
Yeah.
It's really weird.
What can even be worse is like you caught him in a lie and you pointed out the lie and you were feisty and mean about the lie, and that's all there forever to be seen. And so it's like there's no, I talked in one of my things about off ramps, and I haven't even really fleshed that out very much, but like there's some sort of thing where you need to give people off ramps to their like if they're holding on to a bad idea and not have to maybe
I was in
fully
that's in that book, isn't it? How to have impossible conversations.
it's tough because like there's some sort of level. I was trying to talk about it, it's fleshing out, but there's some sort of level. Like I brought it up with Flip, like I was saying, if the Midnight Mormons are telling us we were always cool with homosexuals, or something like that, and you say no, you weren't, this, and you try to point at like every single little thing. At some level, are you trying to force them back into doubling down? It's like, okay, fine, we don't like homosexuals, or do you just be like, oh, okay, well, we'll let you have that
That's
off,
tough.
you.
Some of the
And
best arguments for a member is to say, well, that's culture. That's not like gospel. And I have a really big problem with that. Like, that's not fair to say, by their fruits you shall know them. And all the good fruits, like you were talking about earlier, how there's just a lot of really great people trying to do the right thing. And you don't get to say, see all that good fruit, and then when there's bad fruit, you just say, oh, that's just the natural man. But that's
yeah.
not fair. You don't actually get to do that. Like, if you, that means that I don't know. At some point, you got to take responsibility for the bad stuff too. You don't get to just say, I don't know. But at the same time, I do agree there are human problems. I would say this is kind of where I've been trying to do what I've been trying to do. I'm not always good at it, but instead of trying to criticize either ex-Mormons or Mormons and say, see the hypocrisy, because everybody's a hypocrite, right? Instead of like trying to point, like have the fingers point back at me and go, well, how can I be better? How can I do better? Self-evaluation. Because bottom line is I can't change other people. I can change myself. I can't change them.
Yeah.
So,
But
anyway.
there's some sort of level of like, so over the past 5, 6, 7 years, because you say, hey, look at this thing from Jordan Peterson, or what did Ben Shapiro say, and somebody says you're a Nazi, there's some level of me like today maybe they're willing to come back and say, you weren't a Nazi, I didn't. Well, they don't even give you that apology. They say, I don't think somebody who likes Jordan Peterson's a Nazi, or I never thought that. I never thought that way. And you're like, well, I could dig up the thing where he did say it, but there's some sort of level like you give him off ramp and say just.
That's true.
So you're not admitting to the past thing that you did. So there's some sort of level of that's not nice, but at the same time too is like I'll give you the off ramp, like that's why I say off ramps. Like there's some sort of fine line between off ramping and gaslighting. Does that make sense?
Yes. That's actually the thought I had. Because at what point, that's the exact thought I had.
It's like you are allowing some level of gaslight, but what level will you allow it to? Like, no, this one you got to own, But I don't know. It's hard, but
not only that, but you have these moments where you even see it. I see it myself, like especially when I'm having a personal conversation where you're kind of playing with an idea. So you say something and you really don't even like the way it landed or
Yeah.
anything, but then you still try to defend it anyway. I don't know how to
Yeah.
explain it. Like you
No,
just
of course.
like, I don't know.
Well, that's one of the things about
And so
one of Peterson's points about speech forever is you have to say it, you have to speak it because you're trying to sort it out and you're trying to work it out, and part of how you work it out is by putting it out there. And
but not you shouldn't defend it when you even know when it landed, right when it landed, you're like, that wasn't quite right, but I'm gonna go with it. Like I don't know how to, like,
yeah,
this happens when me and my husband are having discussions all the time, where I don't know if it's all the time, but and then you kind of have to like go, okay, I'll be honest, I really wasn't even sure I was okay with that idea when I said it, or you know what I mean, and you kind of come back to it. But
so podcast
yeah.
world, I think you'll have that moment like a bunch of times, and like you can realize that it's a different thing. Like, hey, delete that out tomorrow or something like that. But at the same time, too, it suddenly makes you very, very aware of like everything I say. Well, maybe I have to defend it or not defend it, or can I go back on it? But you feel. I asked for an hour. We're hitting on an hour and a half. I don't know if you ever run, but like in this
Yeah.
hour and a half, do you feel like you had a moment like that at all? Like, oh, maybe I didn't want to say that, or like if you sat on it for a
I don't
night,
know.
you
No, I think it's
no
probably
moment like
fine.
that.
I don't love using my kids' names. You could bleep out my kids' names.
Yeah, I'll find those if you
Maybe
want to.
even my husband's name.
Yeah, I can bleep out it for sure.
So,
But yeah, it gets weird like that. But like anytime I talk to the Midnight Mormons afterwards, I'm like, what did I say? So
oh,
all
cool.
right. Well, anything else you wanted to shoot out there? What are you going to be coming up on? Wait a minute. I wanted to get it. You're going to be talking to
Oh,
Vervaeke,
that's
but
right.
maybe I'll.
With
That's
who?
awesome. Vervaeke, you said you're. Yeah.
I hope it happens for real. Like I have a Zoom link and it's scheduled, and I think it's gonna happen. Like
That's sweet.
I am one of his Patreon. Like if you're one of, okay, John Vervaeke has a Patreon account, and if you are at the $100 level, he will have a chat with you like once a
Oh,
month.
that's so cool.
But they were all sold out. And so he still had some $50 ones. And so I emailed him and I was like, I'd really like to have a recorded conversation and like put it in a podcast. And I think I could point a bunch of people to your work and it would be really helpful for them. And anyway, he said that,
Vervaeke's he's the king of what I almost kind of try to make some sort of secular sense out of
well,
what we're doing.
he's not willing, he's willing to just say it how it is. Like he had one moment in one of his discussions where he basically said science killed religion. It did. Like that's how it is. That's where we're at. But it would be wrong. And I can't remember how he worded it. Like I think it's often worded throwing out the baby with the bathwater, right? But he didn't use that phrase. He just basically said there's there's still meaning in life, basically. And this is
Da-
using cognitive science. This is kind of what makes sense to me. So take it for what it's worth. I think this might help.
Yeah, and then he's got some descriptive things beyond the normative things. Like there's some descriptive things like what we're doing and what works in that religious realm and that religious thinking that's I think is really helpful and should be helpful to atheists to kind of get over
Yeah.
the, you know,
Having goal setting and just, and then understanding how we work and how
the
our cognitions work.
liturgy. Why liturgy? Like going through actions out in the world
Yes.
with people is important and that sort of stuff and why it works. But
Even our language and stuff.
totally. He's the king of it because like so many atheists will kind of be turned off to Jordan Peterson. They'll say, "Well, listen to Vervaeke. Like Vervaeke's the one who's putting it into terms that you should be able to understand better, like what he's getting at." But anyway, that'll be awesome. So you doing anything else? Anything else coming out besides that, or just kind of starting to
I
work into
well,
doing
yeah,
stuff?
I'm editing my second episode. I don't think we even mentioned it. So I put in, so Bill Rill requested female voices, and so I said, "Hey, I've been thinking about content I want to create," and I told him what I was. In fact, after Thrive, I called him and I was like, "Are you sure you still want me to do this? This is what I want to do." And I was like, I would want to talk to people like Cardin, even though it wasn't Cardin, it was actually Kwaku at the debate that just really gave some low blows to Bill Real and his wife. And I didn't think very highly of it at all, but I
I don't
still
remember them
want,
saying anything about his wife. I remember them saying something about.
oh, it hurt his wife is what it was.
Oh,
It was really like I was sitting
that he didn't
behind
dare to
them and
talk or something.
watching. I don't know, I don't know if this should be public
I
because I
can
mean,
take it
this is
out if
kind
you
of
want.
insider information, but I'm sitting behind them. Were you there for the whole thing?
Oh no, I had to leave at a gig. But you're talking about like they hinted at being in open relationships and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And I was sitting behind Bill Real and his wife, and she's like sobbing because of the stuff that
really.
Kwaku was saying. Yeah, like just I don't know. And I don't I don't I don't know. Maybe there's stuff there that I'm just not aware of, but
Yeah, I don't.
just some low blow stuff.
Yeah,
Like you can't attack the argument, so you're going to attack the person kind of stuff, you know? Like
ad
why?
hominem. Yeah,
Yeah. So,
yeah. I guess
anyways, but
it was
and
too under
but
the
I
radar for me to catch that exactly. But
well, I went up. So I went up and I wanted to meet all of the Midnight Mormons. I knew that was like my only chance to meet them, and I knew Thrive was happening, so I really wasn't too worried about the Ex-Mormon panel side of it. So I like was standing around so that I could meet all of them, and I met Brad and Cardin and Kwaku, and I don't know, like I think a lot of them for showing up, honestly, because people don't do that. They don't.
yeah,
It would have been a lot cooler if it was civil, more civil, but it is what it is, right? So, um, but my hope is that I could have conversations on a conversation, like a real conversation with them.
you still
That would be my
Quaco
hope.
was on Radio Free Mormon or Bill Real with them together one time. I listened to it pretty
Yeah.
recently.
Yeah, but I would want to get into like real stuff. That was a pretty surface level conversation, I felt like.
Like, how did you get into this? Why are you, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they'd,
And give him a chance to like say why he believes and um meet him where he's at, because obviously it's really important to him, and I think
they asked me what types of Mormons I thought each one of them were. And I told them, I said, I think Quaku's an occultist, and I think that's kind of how he gets into the religious side of it and like the mystical, magical, stuff. And he said, yeah, pretty much. And, I just called a Cardin the California Mormon. And, Brad's kind of just more what I know of as Mormons in the Salt Lake Valley, but he's from Canada, but he seems like a Salt Lake Mormon to me,
oh, of course he's from Canada. All cool people are from Canada.
But I thought it was pretty. I told him I thought it was pretty goofy for the Radio Free Mormon guy to kind of put himself on the level of decency of Brad, because there's some Hatfield McCoy stuff there going on there big time
Oh,
with
totally.
those guys. Like they have not been above it, and if anybody is above it, it's Brad. And but on the other side, there's all the low blows in the world too, and but that's more of that stuff generally happens kind of on threads or behind the scenes or on Facebook or something
Can
like
you
that.
see it from RFM's point of view though? Like just by making everything public, it kind of makes it harder for them to like not show up. I don't
What
know.
do you mean? Like,
Like I was skeptical that everyone was going to show up. Like I wasn't sure it was going to happen for real. And I almost felt like all the drama happened so that we could get out of it because of the drama.
that's what I point to drama a lot because of that. Like, people will make it a dramatic thing to get out of the debate, to get out of the actual. And but what I'm saying is, I think that happens from the Radio Free Mormon side, big time. Like, if you've followed any of their threads around it and that sort of stuff, like they get as salty as the Midnight Mormons ever did. And I don't think that they acted
Maybe I'm
above the
blinded.
fray and all that.
I can't see as much from the RFM side. RFM seems like a pretty, I don't know how to describe it. Of all of the commentators, he's been my favorite because I feel like he's pretty unemotional about it, if that makes sense. And he has his
And it
opinion,
says
and he will
he's
throw his little daggers that are kind of like jokey kind of things, and that would be, I could see how they could be offensive, but they're, I don't know, they just seem not,
going for
they're
the
not
going for the
personal. They're just kind of like a sly little, like maybe a Sky Daddy joke, but that's not it. Like that's not what he says. I've never heard him say Sky Daddy, but maybe something like that. You know what I mean? Where it might belittle the
well
belief a little
in that
bit.
debate he like said something about don't get behind Carden if you drop the soap
Oh,
and
that
he
was
won't
so
grab it or
weird.
something like that. But that's not any type of thing. Like I do think that they actually kind of get personal. Like as I watched when I was trying to like research where the thing was because they said, "Hey, show up to the thing," and I didn't even know where it was. And so I researched it and I looked at all these different threads like across Reddit and all that stuff. And each one I came across as a Radio Free Mormon one, and there was saltiness all through those threads. And some of it was in the initial thing by or maybe Radio Free Mormon is not the guy posting it or something, but it's on his thread and like in his initial thing, and they, I do think that, I mean, there's a little bit of like overplaying the stuff too, like Quaco and his friends memeing about John DeLynn and the big deal that they made all of that, but then of course Quaco and them came back at DeLynn about the harassment stuff and all that. But I watched a long video.
That was yeah. What did you think of that video?
Quaco's?
Uh-huh.
I mean okay, so I made a comment on the first comment I ever made on those guys. I called them like they seemed sort of like the Young Turks to me. Like you guys are like the Mormon, the Young Turks, like the way you guys do these like weird takedowns and stuff. And it's like my very first, it's probably still there somewhere on the YouTube video somewhere, like saying, what kind of screwballs are you guys? But at the same time too, I knew from the flip side of it that they played stuff like that up and made those sorts of deals. This week I watched.
Well, the way they sold it though, I can't remember how they sold it. Like they were like, they were going to apologize, or I can't remember.
Oh, and then like they switcherooed and said, "Oh, I've got the details on." But the thing is, like talking with them behind the scenes, they're so.
Well, you've covered this before. Like to me,
they're so internet ready. They're ready to try to make waves or be known or use a thing like that to get clicks.
Maybe the parallels to the John DeLynn thing and to you've mentioned this, and Brett Kavanaugh was pretty aware. Like I was aware of that, and it bothered me. The double standard bothered me. And I don't know where they stood on Brett Kavanaugh, but my guess is
put it on his clips. DeLynn had it right on his Facebook.
Of what their opinion was.
I put it on my video. I put his post on my video about it.
No, not John DeLynn's opinion.
Oh.
Midnight Mormons. I understood that.
I don't think Midnight Mormons are pushing on any sort of principle at all. I think they're just kind of
just trying to smear him.
Just smearing them, yeah.
Right. That's what bugged me though. Like I'm like, be consistent.
Right? Yeah, for sure. But I mean, I think they would. I don't know. I mean, Jonathan Streeter, when he was on with the Midnight Mormons, he pointed out to them, like, if people have problems with, like, some sort of sexual harassment thing, you got to understand that people have those problems with Joseph Smith. And Jonathan Streeter said that right to Quaco, and they left it on. See. They left it on the whole entire thing, you know. But those back and forth drama things, there's part of me that's just all kind of like, get past it, you know. Like if you did it and didn't do it, if you're all playing the game.
See, I'd like to talk to both of them though. Like I'd actually like to have a real. I think that's where people's interests are.
That's what I'm saying. Is like get past the profilicity of the whole thing. Get past the whole entire internet drama edge of it, and let's do the real conversations too. Let's not use all that stuff to avoid it. But both of you got to stop the Hatfield McCoy of it and just say, hey, yeah, we're gonna talk now, and just do this type of a. Get past that stuff gets internety, you know, and when we're in real people world, it's a little bit difficult for people to grasp because like James Lindsay, if you follow his Twitter at all, he gets real spicy on Twitter. And then part of his joke about that is that he says it's like a Baudrillardian world, like Twitter's not real. It's not the real world, so I respond to it like it's not real. And then if anybody ever talks to him in real life, he's not going to be that same person. He says, well, that's because that internet world, I'm just deciding that that's not the real world. And who I'm going to be there is going to be this hyper reality person.
Yeah, but
And
the thing that other people that but other people might take him seriously and know that he's credible and then take him seriously on Twitter. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, it causes a problem. But part of his point is too is that like almost everybody else on Twitter, even if they're not being him, they're being that a little bit. Like everybody's hyper real on the internet world. It's
well, maybe that's why I left. I left Twitter. I'm not on there anymore.
yeah. Well, that's part of his point. It's just not real. Everybody's not being real.
I was commenting on a bunch of James Lindsay's stuff, and then anyway, I
Did he block
Twitter
you?
wasn't. Huh? No, he didn't block me. I'm always. I try to give. I really do when I'm interacting. I've only been blocked by John Dehlin.
I wasn't going to ask about that, but he's never blocked me, and I've done said certain things to him, but not so much directly to him on his Facebook. You know, I don't. But there's been.
I don't. I usually, yeah, I usually will. I don't know. I'll be honest. I have a tendency to point out. I be critical without saying what they're doing right, and that's hard for anybody to
I
hear.
do that too, but they didn't block me yet. But they blocked Flip. Flip's completely blocked, and we don't even remember what that one was. But we've been blocked off of other ex-Mormon, like that story I told on the Midnight Mormons of us telling them that it was against the Civil Rights Act to not hire Mormons. It really did get us kicked out, and I got suspended from the page for a week, and Flip got kicked off of the page for it. There's been so many different things over the years that
it's bizarre. It's really bizarre.
Have you heard of like it's a little bit strange with like the NRX movement, like Mencius Molebug or anything like that? So there's this whole thing where there's these people who understand fully the entire arguments of postmodernism, that nothing's actually real. It's all just kind of invented narrative and matrix, you know what I mean? And they go all the way with it and say, yeah, we get that we're in a postmodern era and we're going to become believers again under a postmodern narrative. We're going to play that role of the believer again. So like they've gone all the way through the postmodernism, all the way back to saying now we're going to be trad cons.
No way.
On the other side, it's like doing like a kayfabe. You know, kayfabe is the term in wrestling that you never take off the persona. You know what I mean? Like the WWE wrestling.
Oh.
You're always the persona. You don't ever drop the persona. So they've taken on this kayfabe type tradcon, fully understanding the postmodern angle of it, that if everything's just narratives, I'm going to do this narrative. And there's been some levels. I actually, you know, that Jackson Washburn kid, I actually asked him directly on his TikTok because I don't know if he's real or not. I asked him directly on his TikTok.
I'm friends with him. He's in the restoration table.
Yeah, I think he probably is, but I asked him directly.
That's how I met him.
I said, "Are you doing the hyper reality thing? Are you doing the kayfabe thing? Are you like I couldn't tell. Like, are you kind of playing out this game? Like you've gone through the whole philosophical postmodern thing.
Like you couldn't tell if he was genuine.
You're deciding to double back into it.
What did he say?
I think I've had the same sort of questions with Kwaku. Like, are you playing this game? Are you playing this game of choosing it after knowing and doubling down into it like a WWE wrestler doubles into their personality?
Okay.
And Jackson, he said, no, I don't know what you're talking about. But that's what a person like that would say. You know what I mean? But,
interesting.
But there's some people who
he comes across as genuine to me.
I
do think he is kind of on the left side of politics.
Oh, for sure. I mean, especially since he's coming out now with, being more in the, it's going to happen if you go to those divinity schools and all that stuff like that, but he's going to that. And, but I thought he put out like a really thoughtful, thing on Mormon Stories just yesterday. And,
I didn't know that.
And a bunch of people, of course, like the atheist scientific types, just tried to rip into it because he was putting out these philosophical, phenomenological ideas about how he still thinks it's all people acting stuff out inside of religion. And I just put on it like, I know what you're saying. I get what you're saying here. Like, I feel what you're trying to say. But like, he just got attacked on all sides by the scientific atheistic types. But I didn't know with him, especially when I saw him on TikTok, like doing his stuff and like showing up with like eyeliner and all that stuff, talking about being like a hard Mormon. I was like, am I watching WWE wrestling here? I don't know. Like in the modern profilicity, like profile era, I don't. Sorry, Kwaku, I still don't know. like Kwaku.
I haven't put my finger on him either. I felt like he was super genuine in some of his content he put out, and I really liked a lot of the stuff that he did, and the fact that he was willing to talk to people, like, and debate people. But he took a lot of those videos down. I can't find them.
Yeah,
He
I
had
saw
this one
debating.
discussion with a pastor that I really loved, and it was a really good conversation.
There's
I
some
liked it
level
a lot.
where, but he fully like in that Radio Free Mormon debate, like he just gave a big nod that he believes in magic. You know, he believes in magic stones, and even magic stones prior to Joseph Smith's magic stones, and he gets really into the occult. That's why I called him an occultist, like a little bit nowadays. But like some of those kayfabe same types of guys will get into occultist type things themselves, and there is an entire kind of internet world of people playing this game that they're knowing that like if everything's a narrative, I can make up that narrative and play it out as hard as I
That's
want to
sad
play it
because
out.
they don't even believe in objective reality then. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but
That's
I mean
sad.
that's what postmodernism is all the way to
Because they're going to run into a glass door eventually, I think, because I do believe there's objective reality, and we should do our best to figure out what it is. Even though we may never be sure we've landed there, I think we will run into glass doors, or we're going to hit up against reality eventually if we don't
well
try to play the game.
reality bats last, and that's the argument of the new pragmatists that Jordan Peterson always brings up, the C.S. Pierce and the
No.
John who was it William James, and is actually 50, 60 years before the postmodernists. Those philosophers sorted out the problem of epistemology, and the problem of epistemology is Darwinism. Like you're gonna run into reality. It's gonna death will sort out what's a better narrative or not.
Yep.
And but there is some sort of world now that we're all getting into this meta universe of profilicity on the internet, that people can write out these games of playing, choosing a narrative and trying to play it as long as you want to play it, and then flipping it around. Maybe they flip it around later, who knows. But there's all sorts of guys. I'm in this group called like Jordan Peterson Latter-day Saints, whatever, and they're all these sorts of people who are kind of like
Latter-day
weird.
Lobsters?
Yeah, are you in that
I'm
one?
in there.
Yeah.
I
You've
responded
seen-
to one of yours. You didn't respond back.
What did I say? Well, I just put
Well,
one up
I
like
just saw-
goofing
I
on
just-
Jordan Peterson.
No, I just saw you in there, and then I said, "Fancy seeing you here." And it was right after we met in the
Oh,
front of the
really?
line, and I thought that you might have recognized me, but
I didn't see it.
didn't.
I didn't see you answer back to me or anything like that. But it's actually Streeter who got me into there too. So, but I didn't know it was there. But like so many of those
Alejandro
posts
is
in there.
really nice. I had a Zoom conversation with Alejandro, and he is like a really
He seems cool.
genuinely nice person, and so is Anthony Diaz.
He's in a
too.
class with like Terrell Givens right now.
Yeah, I saw that. That's super
Yeah.
interesting.
But they put all sorts of stuff up in there that like I kind of almost think that they're hitting on the levels of that type of kayfabe I'm talking about. You know what I mean? Like they've gone through the problems of it not being so
When
real.
you
But
say
they're gonna.
they, there isn't a single
they.
type of person in there.
No, I know for sure.
That
They,
group
the
is
people, the
weirdest
random people I
ever.
talk about. Yeah, the random posts I talk about. Some of those random posts are
Feel that way.
close to it's the there's an NRX room. It's
have
called
you
like the
listened
Dark
to-
Enlightenment. The
I
Dark
have a
Enlightenment.
podcast. Have you listened to it?
Check it out.
I think if you go listen to the Latter-day Lobster podcast, you'll find out who the genuine people are.
Oh,
I
okay.
think there's a handful in there.
Well, I
that
think
are
I can tell
really
that
nice.
Alejandro guy is for sure too.
Yeah, and
But-
then there's another guy in there that's was high school friends with my brother, and he's really nice. Like I don't know.
There's some level like that kayfabe thing I'm talking about is like, even though they're playing a game, I know there's some level that they don't think it's
Don't they hope it is though? Still, I kind of got into
I
that
think
a
they
little
hope.
bit.
I think there's
Like,
a
I kinda got
pragmatic
into
thing.
that a little bit, right? So like toward the end, I'd say I dabbled with that line of thinking,
Me
with kind of
too.
going, well, if Mormonism's not true, then nothing's true. Therefore, I might as well just live this out.
Play the game. Yeah.
Right. And
Yeah,
then
I think there's
I
that
think it was
level.
Jordan Peterson that gave me the confidence to say what I think and to actually sort out what I actually thought was real.
So much of internet tradcons, like especially ones that like make YouTube channels call themselves tradcons, are doing that. Like they very frequently. There's a guy called the Distributist, and he's a Catholic now, and he was like he's an ex-atheist, and now he's a full-on super Catholic, and he's doing that on some level. Although I think if you listen to him, he's a very genuine guy, a very smart guy. But like he is willing himself into believing it because it's the best pragmatic way to be. And
Isn't that what the church is trying to tell people to do, is to choose to believe?
pretty much, and that's what he's doing. But at the same time, you know, there's that meta postmodern level that they know what they're doing. There's that little level above it that
And I don't
they
like that. I think you
yeah,
should say what you think. If you don't think it, I don't think you should let special pleading be the reason that you believe in your religion. And that's what I realized I was doing, right?
yeah.
Like
So
I
the
realized that outside of my own belief, I wouldn't believe that a guy supernaturally found gold plates. I just wouldn't
yeah.
believe that.
So, but that's where it ended up with that with Midnight Mormons today, because they're kind of pressuring on me, like saying, "Well, there's some sort of point. Well, maybe you'll come back. You know, my grandpa came back later because it's just better in than out, and that sorts of stuff." And they're just saying to me, and you know, I just kind of like, maybe, you know what I mean? But I won't play that game either. I'll never be the guy who's like, I gotta have a road to Damascus moment, or
No,
or
if they
it's
allow
I'm
me to
not gonna.
participate where I'm at, which I think they might at some point, then maybe I'll
That's
come back.
and you're hitting
Like
on why
I have to be able to say what I think at church.
you're hitting on where I put my resignation letter in. I actually put it in when Deline got excommunicated, but I misinterpreted that moment because I was going through a lot of stuff myself of saying, hey, can I be kind of like one of those Jewish non-believers who's still Jewish, who's still
Right.
with you? And I was really pushing for that, especially for that, because I was talking about getting married with this girl from Brigham City, you know what I mean? And we were trying to figure it out forever, and I couldn't go in. That's one of the things I didn't like about John Deline's like state LDS stuff, is like he had these things on like how to like get around the temple recommend questions, you know? And I'm like, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go in and say, no, I'm sorry. I don't believe Joseph Smith was a prophet like you believe that. You know what I mean? I can do I can do a weird interpretation of what a prophet is. You know what I mean? But like I'll even give, I brought it up in the past. I can't do that. And I viewed Deline's excommunication as like them drawing the line in the sand of like, no foyer Mormons. You know what I mean? No half believing, no whatever. And so I said, okay, if that's how you, although I think that was a bit of a misinterpretation, because I think they more did it because Deline pushes on them to try to get them to change. But I interpreted it as, no, we don't want any of you non full believers here, and you're either in or you're out. And if you guys are drawing that line, I'll take that line. And so I sent in my letter, and maybe they will get better at that. I mean, I think any sort of religion, like the Catholics are good at that, and the Jews are good at that. Why are they good at that? Time, because they weren't good at that, you know. And so it's going to be part of the evolution of the Mormon religion if they want to stay alive. But who knows how fast that'll happen? Things evolve faster now because of the internet. But
That's going to make a lot of people uncomfortable. I know, like all the changes that Nelson made, that made a lot of members uncomfortable. Like 2-hour church, and we're going to change this, and we're going to change ministering, and we're going to change this. I guess you were gone by then.
yeah,
Like that year, that beginning, I guess that was about a year before we left. But a lot of people were really uncomfortable with all the changes that he made, and just changing the name of the young women, and
too fast, too much.
A lot of people were just like, "What's going on?" So,
well, I myself, I mean, I could be like, whoa, great, 2 hours. But at the same time, too, just, I think like you say, is like, if we're going to be doing 2 hours, I don't want to be sitting through like this boring, like I could go in if we were talking and all really talking about stuff, like if it was like Latter-day Lobsters, you know what I mean, or something like that. But if we're just going to go kind of regurgitate the same, but that's part of the thing about religion, is like the ones that make it work are going to have to do it. I mean, Jonathan Pajau talks about this a whole lot, is like the reason why Thrive and all those other sorts of like bigger brain philosophical things, or like Sam Harris isn't going to ever create that stuff, is because you have to have something that talks to both high and the low, the ones who want to think about it on 15 different levels, and the ones who just want some little story about a baby in a manger. And that's why there's a manger in the star, or there's the wise men and the poor men, or like the representation of the ox and the lambs. Like it's showing that it's for both the high and the low. And the
Isn't
story.
it kind of sad though that you get reprimanded for believing like that? I remember looking down on people that tried to do doctrine, like deep doctrine. That was a no-no. Like I always felt like don't go down that road, because a lot of those people, they might leave even, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like be satisfied with what you get in the manual. Like it's seriously what I felt like I was taught. Like, so
But-
it's kind of sad that you wouldn't. Jonathan Peugeot, I think, would have been pushed out of the church.
Oh, totally. And even like as I go like recommending people look at them to kind of get those ideas of symbolic Mormonism, they'll be like, well, I can't get the ideas from Peugeot. I mean, in one of my videos I talked about, I broke up with that girlfriend because I tried to liken something from Dostoevsky to the church, and it just irritated her. And I think she was irritated that I was mentioning Dostoevsky, and the church could be on the same plane of thinking about Christ. You know what I mean? I think that I never even got an answer out of her. You know, like, well, what did I do wrong? And that was after years of being like a super anti-theist, to get to the point where I'm saying, hey, I see something that I saw in Dostoevsky and in Nelson. I'm like, okay, if we're not able to talk on that level, like I can't, you know. But that's kind of how it is with Mormons. But they're getting better at that. My friend Kevin, who's on the podcast, has always been great at that. He's really great at kind of riding with me of like any sort of like Peterson does, like how Peterson goes and tries to interpret the Bible in his way. Kevin's very open to that, and always has been open to that, you know. But other Mormons are not, and they'll breathe fire over your face for trying to do that sort of thing. But there's the other level of that is Sam Harris will never get as big as the Mormon Church because he doesn't have the boiled down basic boring story either. It's all got to be high-minded philosophy. And how do you sort that out?
Not that people are too stupid to understand either.
No,
it more has to do with it's not interesting to everybody.
Yeah,
It's just not interesting.
It's got to be delivered in that way. There's some sort of liturgy to it. There's like movement and actions to it, and ideas and visuals, and all that sort of stuff. And it's communicating in all these ways that aren't just galaxy brain philosophy.
Probably in ways that we don't understand.
For sure. 100%.
Yeah.
For Vakey's getting there. So.
Yeah. But, that'd be nice, right?
Yeah. I saw, well, in that same, I posted a clip from him with Pajao, and he was talking about stuff about like, there's monkeys and little kids trying to mimic each other, and they're mimicking each other to get this food. And there's this thing where there's like a lever to pull, and the monkey and the kid both figure out really quickly to pull this lever and they get the food. So then all these additional steps get added to it, but nothing changes. It's always just that one lever to get the food. And you go and represent all these different things to get to the food. The monkey goes and just keeps pulling the straight lever. I just pull this lever, I get the food. The human does all the extra unnecessary steps all the way down to get the food. It's the human. And Verbeke says, so does that say the apes are smarter? No. The mimicking, the ability to mimic, even if it doesn't really make sense to the final thing, is evolutionarily stronger across time because it plays a bigger role. And so there's something about teaching and showing and doing the liturgy and mimicking how other people act or how you act in the world that puts you on a plane above the monkeys.
Well, yeah, I don't know. I still have hope that maybe I can find a church community that I can actually support all the way through. I have hope for that. I doubt it'll be the LDS church just because it's interesting because you have...
You're not saying it's a zero chance though.
No, I mean...
They could make enough changes or something.
Well, it's not even that. I might change, like I might think of something differently that I can go... I will never be the same as it was. I doubt it. I don't understand how I could go back to the way that I used to think, because it's almost like I've gathered new data and I don't understand how I could just ignore that data. It can't go away. But I really don't know how to describe it. Like there's just like that missing of just that weekly renewing. I don't know. And I think there's ways that you can do that yourself. But I am not self-disciplined enough to do it. I really liked that community support or that expectation to be to church every week. I don't know. It made me do it. I don't know. But my husband's totally not on the same page. He's like, why go wrestle kids for 2 hours at church? That's not fun. I'm not learning anything. So
Well, I mean, the end of talking with Midnight Mormons today, they were pushing on me, and it was a fast segment because they had to get out of there, and they were, you're kind of put on the spot of could I ever get back into the church and all that sorts of stuff, and I'll say it right how you're saying it. It's like it's not a non-zero chance, but I mean it's not a zero chance, but
it would have to be something I could support fully, though. And right now, I can't do that for the church. I know that. Like, I don't. They are doubling down on the restoration like crazy. Like, we were holding out for the 2020 spring conference, and that was the one where it was like 200th anniversary of the first vision, I think. And so they put out that proclamation of
yeah,
the first vision. And I had just learned that there were 4 different accounts of the first vision. Like, I'm like, you're not going to even incorporate all of the, like, a good historian would take the first account. Like, there's so many problems with the first vision. And I'm just like, wait, what?
yeah.
You're doubling down on this? I had a hard time with it. So to me, that,
You gotta buy the story here.
yeah.
It's
And then
non-starter.
that's when I realized I was like, and then it kind of hit me like a ton of bricks. I was like, Sandra Tanner knew about this a long time ago. I wonder if she had that same thought where, oh, I found all this information, they're going to fix it now. But they didn't. They just doubled down on everything.
Yeah,
And I don't know. For some reason, I felt like, oh, I found out all this information, and now they're going to like come catch up to where I am without being aware that there's probably lots of members like me that are sitting in the pews that don't know any of it. And of course, they're not going to do that. I don't know.
it's funny. It's so strange in the internet age because I mean, I'll tell my girlfriend, she's like, "Well, what did the Mormon? What do your parents think about this stuff?" And they don't know. And like, well, why don't they just know? Why don't they? Not so simple.
Yeah.
and and I did kind of start going over it with my parents a little bit because when they initially started talking to me, and they said, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, whoa. It's fine, you can stay out." They were really nice and great about me, but like the second they realized there was more there to it, they just, "Well, okay, that's fine. Like,
Yeah.
you go do you," or something like that.
Yeah.
But the what would make me go back? That's one of the issues with it is part of the double-edged sword of that is if the church goes making these changes that are happening in so many churches that are kind of more based off of like technocratic pressure, you know what I mean? Pressure from
It's not going to be a church like Jordan Peterson's church.
no, it's going to turn into it's going to be part of the mess of the technocratic internet super future. And if they go merging into that, it's also a no thank you. And that merging into that sort of thing, they could get rid of some of their origin stories and that sort of stuff. And I still would be like,
It's
okay,
not
no
even the
thanks.
origin story that bothers me. It's the certainty that it happened that way.
Yeah,
It's the certainty that I can't support. It's that I know. And you might not know today, but you will know. Like I know now when the apostles say that, like that, I can't support that because
yeah,
when they say I know, there's a lot of members that they really actually believe they're talking to Jesus, and that's how they know. They trust them enough. They're college educated. They wouldn't say I know unless they really knew. So like they might be in a doubtful state that I was for the 3 years, and they just like hang their testimony on top of theirs and say, well, they know, and they're honest and full of integrity, so they're not going to lie to me. And then when you start to realize, oh, they're operating on the same thing I am, and
what do you think about like Bushman? Because he knows, but what do you think he thinks of?
but I don't know, does he believe like in a pragmatic thing, in a
I think at
pragmatic
some
way?
level, like if you see somebody who knows that sort of stuff and then they keep going, even though it's not that full internet meme way, they're doing that on some level.
Yeah, I've thought about that a lot. And I've also thought about, like, would I be where I am now if I were a seminary teacher? Or if my, like, not in a dishonest way, but in a way like where my intuition was telling me I needed to stay. Whereas, like, I feel like my intuition told me to leave. But if you're if you're
So
believing depends on your survival, does your intuition help you stay?
so Dan Dennett has this whole entire, he was one of the four horsemen, but he has this whole sort of movement, or I don't know what you call it, but where he's like trying to talk about the non-believing clergy and trying to make the world. I don't know exactly how he does his activism for it, but not that it's activism, but he wants to make it like a place where the clergy or any sort of non-believing clergy can not fear losing whatever they have and be open about the doubts of their claims. And so he had some sort of thing like that. But just this week he came out with I think it was an interview where he was saying he thinks church should still happen and people should go to it as theater, and it was pretty wild hearing that coming from Dan Dennett. But Dan Dennett's also kind of one of the guys who gets into the psychology of these types of things and thinks about it like on a evolutionary psychological level. But it was pretty wild hearing that coming from Dan Dennett. But of course it would be totally different if you're living dependent on it and that sorts of stuff. But I don't know. I'm sure there's all sorts of people who just keep going pragmatically, and I think I'm perfectly fine. Like, I went on the Midnight Mormons today giving all these pragmatic reasons for religion, and I'm fine if somebody uses those, or if they're even kind of doing it. It's not me. Like, I can't do it. But if somebody else is doing that kayfabe thing or choosing it pragmatically, I think it's more power to them myself, and I'll even help you. I'll help give you arguments.
Yeah, well, that's kind of the conclusion I've come to. Like, I think we're all trying our best to act in the world the best way we can figure out how to. And I can't blame someone if they think that best path is to be a part of organized religion. I can't. I can kind of see that point of view. I guess my fumbling path has taken me here, and this is where I think I should be. And I really do believe that I'm where I'm meant to be. Like, I actually do believe that. So I do think that if I'm honest with myself and I'm needing to be somewhere else, that I can get there. Like, I can get, keep taking in data and making new judgments, and then keep acting. Like,
Yeah.
that's all you can do.
I said it on the Midnight Mormons, and I say it on my own podcast, and the one that I have is like the tagged one to watch is that I view myself as an usher, and if your way is in, I'll usher you in and give you arguments, and if your way is out, I'll usher you out, and I'll give you arguments, but I'll also say, hey, watch out, there's monsters out there,
Yeah, I remember you said that, and that's a lot how I feel. Like, I feel like I can't make that decision for other people. They have to make it for themselves, and I want to give them the confidence to do that.
Yeah.
And I don't want them to be blind to the dangers. And the one thing that I think I've learned, though, is before I left, I justified staying for all kinds of reasons, thinking that there was only danger on the outside, and I didn't realize the dangers on the inside. Like, there are dangers staying in a belief that you don't believe is real. Like,
yeah, that's true.
so you get really good at lying to yourself, and if you can lie to yourself at that level, what else are you lying to yourself about? YouTube is very dangerous.
Yeah, it's tough, but whatever.
Don't want to get caught in any lies.
Yeah,
So,
for sure.
okay.
Well, all right. This is awesome. Thank you for taking the time and the extra time.
Yeah, it's good to get to know you a little bit more too.
Yeah, you too. Thanks for doing it. I hope that job hits and all that stuff. Send me that stuff. I wanna see that.
Yeah, I'll message it to you on Facebook.
I'll show you some of the dark enlightenment stuff. I think there's even a Wikipedia on it. It's NRX type stuff, but even some of them kind of try to, on that level, pretend like they're fully real, but it's a kayfabe. It's kayfabe. There's a kayfabe level of it. So.
Do you think that's going on in apologetics, in like Mormon apologetics?
Oh, dude, Mormon apologetics are picking up Jonathan Streeter and I have been sharing this stuff all over. They are going full postmodern. Like
Wow.
they really are. Like Jonathan sent this one to me. I sent to you where they're like arguing using Husserl. Like they're talking about. Well, they already have that thing where they call it like transliteration instead of a little bit like you're saying, like maybe God would use this person, put some stuff in his brain, but like they're altering the word of what the thing is. Where when Joseph Smith was translating, it wasn't translating, it's transliteration, and it's kind of playing with like the concepts in postmodernism of how language is formed and how ideas are formed, and how Joseph might have been just talking about horses as he saw horses, and that all came across through this thing that was never actually a direct translation, and they're changing that officially. But there's this
Doesn't
whole
that
other,
matter the way that they understood it at that time? That matters, doesn't it?
yeah.
Like,
Well, they're putting in those arguments that gets all fuzzy with how language is formed and how ideas are formed and how it would have been formed in Joseph Smith's brain. But this other letter of Husserl, he's this philosopher, this phenomenological philosopher, and they say something like, why Bednar said nobody's a homosexual is we're talking about the phenomenology of if you're acting in the world, are you what you're acting, or are you acting what you are? And that goes down through Heidegger, and we're talking about Heidegger and Husserl and these ideas of like, are you what you are, or are you what you act? And there's some sort of level where we're saying you are a child of God, but you aren't what your actions are throughout life. And they have this whole extended thing. But then there's this other guy from Sunstone who says Mormons always were postmodern from the start. The whole entire thing was going against modernity and that sort of deal, and so the whole entire concept was always an idea that made you go, what is truth? There's no real way to tell what truth is, and that truth can actually be a narrative that you form through magic, But
I always thought you could only really know truth through the spirit. That's how I thought truth was discovered. That's what
well,
I almost went down a rabbit hole 10 years ago with Wikipedia, and then I decided that the only way we really know anything is through the spirit.
have you gone through like postmodern, like the real postmodern?
James Lindsay's taught me a bunch, and I think I do understand the concept. I feel like I catch on to concepts fairly well, but I don't know it well enough that I could explain it to someone, if that makes sense. Like, I do feel like I kind of
it's purposely avoidant of having a description. But like if you go through like the Foucauldian and Derridian, and I guess you could say like Leotard, but I mean, it all goes back to the structuralists and post-structuralists, but where the word deconstruction comes from.
It kind of makes sense. I think the best way that I had it explained to me, I listened to a debate between, I wish I could remember his name. Who's the philosopher? Yes, it was Thaddeus Russell and the other guy. I can't think of. Yep.
Stephen Hicks.
Yep. And that's where he does a really good job of explaining what it is. And I was like, oh, that makes sense. Like, and that's actually a fair argument, and it's aimless. It's completely aimless.
Yeah, it's not listed.
And that's what a terrible way to live.
Well, it's really taken over and dominated everything. So I mean, going through college, I was kind of force-fed the postmodernism, and so I was in. I said in one of the podcasts, like I looked for Stephen Hicks's book. I went to professors' open hours asking them, what the heck is this stuff you guys are putting me through? What are you talking about here? And nobody wanted to give a direct answer, probably because they couldn't give a direct answer, but they also knew that you can't give a direct answer of what it is. And there's this famous YouTube video by this guy called Cuck Philosophy. He changed it to CK Philosophy, but where he challenges Stephen Hicks's book. I sparked that video, and it's like one of the most famous. It's one of the most famous videos in the YouTube left because it's critical of Stephen Hicks, and I was the guy who showed that guy Stephen Hicks, and I was telling him that, but he has this whole argument of saying that Stephen Hicks is just an idiot because he says Kant is a postmodernist, but Stephen Hicks actually goes into the depth of why he calls Kant a postmodernist and why it's controversial in the exact book. So it's just kind of like a bad faith argument. But the whole entire thing is like Kant has this thing called the noumenon, which is the whole entire. Kant was postmodernist because he was trying to fit religion into the modernist world. He was postmodernist going backwards. He was kind of more arguing for some things like you can't tell what truth is. And his noumenon is the idea of like, you can't tell, your senses can only tell you what your senses are, and you don't know what's real in the world. All you know is what your sensory is, you know. And all the postmodernists jumped off of that concept, and that's the point that Hicks is pointing at. But that video, if you talk to any sort of leftist about Hicks and postmodernists, they will give you that argument from that video. Say, Hicks just says Kant is a postmodernist, that idiot. You know, Kant is the quintessential modernist. And they'll just regurgitate that argument. And somebody who, if you watch that ContraPoints video about Peterson.
Yeah, I watched that one.
That video makes the exact argument. That video, she points out like, oh, you guys like these modernists. Well, it seems like these modernists have gotten to these postmodern ideas. She makes the argument for Hicks, you know, right there in it, is that those ideas of you can't tell what truth is started really early in modernism.
That's one of my... I was really scared to watch that because I was like, I like Jordan Peterson and I didn't want to... But someone brought ContraPoints to my attention, and then I saw that I saw that she had a Jordan Peterson rebuttal, and I was like, I probably ought to listen to that. And so I watched it, and it was super bizarre. Like that whole... That's
a deconstruction. That's real deconstruction, you know.
Well, it was super bizarre, but have you seen the latest one that she put out?
Which one, on Envy? Or I don't know if that was recently.
Yeah.
Yeah, bits and pieces.
Do you like it or no?
No. But watch this video.
I actually thought it was pretty good.
Oh, well, because it is a deconstruction. The thing is, like, I always kind of get irritated with people using the word deconstruction when they're talking about faith, but that's being pedantic. But deconstruction is kind of more of a specific thing where you just kind of really it's textual. It's about a word. It's about words. It's inside of post-structural arguments and that sort of stuff.
Well, so it's self-reflecting. That's why I like it.
Yeah, well, the Derridian deconstruction is, she went through all the different shifting meanings of the word envy throughout the ages and throughout the times and shows that the meaning of it is shifty, and that's Derridian deconstruction. Some people say that Judith Butler misunderstood deconstruction when she took it and transposed it onto the categories of gender, because deconstruction is not supposed to be done with a what you call it a heuristic like that, like bringing it out into the real world. It's supposed to be textual, and but the stuff's shifted so much nowadays that now it's Streeter kind of pointing me as like, social constructionists think that deconstruction is undoing the social construction from your world and that sort of stuff. But the original concept, like if you look up what deconstruction is from Derrida, it's not that. But
oh, really?
Yeah, but now if you follow Derrida, it means that now. Yeah, because that's how meaning shifts.
That's how people use it, and that's how definitions are made. That's interesting, though. Back to Hicks. Yeah. ContraPoints
is a real deal postmodernist. Like, I don't know, like you get into arguments and that sort of stuff, and so many people kind of don't understand those concepts, but when you come across somebody who really does and kind of like wields them correctly, that's where you get somebody who's able to...
I don't agree with her, but I feel like she makes I can... what's the word for it? I can respect it, like, if that makes sense.
I think if you go down the rabbit hole with the real postmodernists at any sort of point, you kind of have to say the same thing. Like, I can go all the way with Foucault, and go all the way with Derrida, and all that sorts of stuff.
I can respect that conclusion, but that's not my conclusion.
They're making a point that has a sense.
Even Jordan Peterson says that, though.
Yeah, but the problem is, go ahead.
Have you seen the Sovereign Nations channel? Yeah. That Christian guy that has on James Lindsay. Yeah. I can't remember his name, but he had on Hicks and Lindsay.
It's Michael O'Fallon.
Okay. Yeah. So he had on Hicks and Lindsay for like, I think 1 or 2 or 3 in a row. And I watched those, and Hicks, I really like Hicks.
Yeah, Hicks is great. Have you watched Unsafe Space?
I've watched a few of them. I didn't get into them. I watched her on Trigonometry, I think
Trigonometry.
it's
Yeah.
called,
Hicks
and
was
I
just
thought
on
her story
them
was
like
super
last week.
interesting because she's kind of gone back to religion.
Oh yeah.
Interestingly, that's what I found out on Trigonometry. I was like,
Except
that's really
I
interesting.
don't think she's kayfabe. I think she's back to believing it. But her reasons
Right.
were kayfabe, but or her original reasons. But Hicks was just on there like 2 weeks ago, and he went in depth on the postmodernism
On
stuff
trigonometry or on
on
unsafe
trigonometry,
spaces?
unsafe space. Yeah, he was
Okay.
on trigonometry too, but he was just talking about Hitler and the
Oh, I
Nazis
didn't
on
know
that one.
that.
He
Because
was on both of them.
he does have a podcast,
Yeah.
but he doesn't really have his own YouTube channel. I don't think.
Yeah, so the way ContraPoints deconstructs the word or deconstructs Peterson, that's real deconstruction. And the real deconstruction is ultimately just to get to a point of let's question the reality of anything and everything. It's there is no resolution. There is no answer.
The
There
reason
is
I
no
appreciated
truth.
the video is because she actually represented his ideas for what he actually believed. She didn't call him a Nazi and then just dismiss him, right?
She was she was doing a deconstruction. She knew what she was doing. And the whole entire point is to create the questioning of possibility of any sort of chance towards any truth, and some people might think that she pulled it off correctly or got it done, but watch I pulled a clip. Kevin and I did one called Deconstructing Something, and I pulled a clip from the guy, but there's this guy who I don't know if he's fully. I don't think he's kayfabe. I think he's really just conservative, but he's like a Scottish or Irish conservative. It's called Morgoth's Reviews, and I'll listen to a bunch of those like really conservative people who are just all over the internet too, just to hear what their opinions are and stuff. Because they'll be they'll be critical of Peterson from the conservative side, and
There's a lot of religious people that are annoyed that he won't just admit that he believes in God.
there's that, and then there's the level of like they don't like that he also pulls away their identity politics from them.
Oh, interesting.
And you can kind of understand that a little bit better when it comes not in the United States. You know what I mean? Like you can understand a bit better why Irish people want to stay Irish better than you can understand United States people wanting to stay white. Does that make sense?
Right.
He's got this one reviewing that ContraPoints video, and it's called like he talks about the violin and deconstructing the violin. And Kevin and I put that, and we kind of like linked it up to like Touch of the Master's Hand from the Mormon Church. There's like the Touch of the Deconstructor's Hand, and the talk about is like you deconstruct stuff down all the way, and you got a violin you can't play anymore. But anyway, we're
Okay.
ramble on
Yeah. We gotta go for reals
stuff.
now.
Yeah, for real. Thanks so much for the time. I'll put it all together. I'll see what we read in
Cool.
or not. Thanks so
All
much.
right. We'll see you.
All right, have a good one.